let's roll it in. Hold on a sec here.
Okay.
Give me one mic check, just to make sure. And when you're talking,
Yeah.
it's always my fault
Yeah.
because I don't talk into the microphone. You get people looking in the corner and whispering awesome stories over here,
Alright.
talking to the mic.
Do I need it really close or like here is okay?
Usually a fist.
Fist?
Yeah.
Fist up.
There you go. Yeah, you should be okay there. Fist my microphone. You just got here.
Okay. Man alive. Like I wrote that book 10 years ago. So many times I thought, right, I need to make a website, stick it up, and I'm terrified of what other people would think.
What are you worried about it not? What's the biggest fear about that? That it doesn't land?
No, I don't.
That people go like, oh, you were addicted to fucking video games. It's
a good question. I don't know what it is. Like, no, I don't think it's the judgment stuff. I think it's more...
Closer to the mic.
Okay.
There you go.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, you're good now.
Yeah, I don't think it's the judgment stuff. Or maybe it is. I don't know why. I don't know what it is, man. It's just very...
For me, when I view people with addictions who have overcome addictions, I never, in my brain, it's not like, oh, you were addicted. It's like, oh my God, like you overcame this massive obstacle. We'll talk about that later, but I mean, lots of personal examples or people around me for sure that have overcome massive addictions, and it's like it's a badge of honor. It's a feather in the cap, man, that they can overcome. And just recently, a thought I've been pumping Green Day in my car for the last 4 months. I don't know why, man. I just
go for it.
They got such good tunes, and I think you can say the singer Billy Joe, right? In the late 80s, maybe they started, early 90s when they really blew up. He's got a unique voice and a unique way of singing. Some of his lyrics too are well, no, he's got good lyrics. I don't want to say they're out there. He's got solid lyrics, but to go so I don't know how to explain it. So when I was young, I looked at them and they were kind of adults. Now that I'm an adult, almost 40, not yet. Looking back, I was like, those guys are like 21, 22, going on stage saying whatever they wanted, acting like morons, like, and using not a strange voice, but like it's unique, it's different, and he had the balls to go on stage and do that. And I really admire that. The passion and willingness and just the not giving a shit about what other people think. And you know, if you take enough shots, man, one's probably gonna land. So I think the big injustice or the worst thing you can do is not take the shot at all.
I know, and it's a lesson you learn because the years slip by, right?
Absolutely.
You started this fucker already.
Yeah,
I knew you do.
Yeah. Hold on, I'll officially roll it in. Welcome back to another episode of This Korean Life, number 126. No, 127. Should be number 127, featuring Dean.
Hello,
Dean, the Ulsan, I call it the catalyst in Ulsan. You were, you were on. I swear to God, you have been on the radar for years. How long have you been here?
3 years.
So yeah, it's probably about 3 years because a new name popped up on Ulsan online and said, hey, I'm looking to start a badminton club. And Nate called me 2 minutes later. He's like, who's this guy? Look at this guy coming in hot into Ulsan, starting a badminton club, a chess club as well.
Yeah.
We got a lot to rewind and unpack here, but you came here 3 years ago after
end of COVID in the UK. Yeah, they just opened the doors, and I was like, I gotta get out, you know, because
you were home for COVID.
Yeah, well, I used to teach in China.
Yeah.
I was teaching in China 4 years, and then I got kind of stuck in the UK for 2 during COVID. The reason I left China was around the time it was kicking off, the British government said, I was just saying this to Nate earlier, that they were going to stop flights to China. And around literally the same day, I heard rumours, because I'd been at the same company 4 years, I heard rumours through the grapevine that they were going to stop paying us on time. They might potentially be paying us less. And so the fear of being stuck in China without stable income and not being able to go home, that kind of freaked me out. And there were some other things. It sounds weird, but I've been trying to try something else other than China for a while. And I was unfortunately, but fortunately, kept getting a pay rise every year. And in China, it was really good money at the time. It was very difficult to say no to that.
Sure.
And they'd just given me a pay rise. I was going to do my, I think it was my 5th year at the time. So I'd just done 4 and just signed the contract. I was going to stay. And then all this stuff kicked off, and part of me kind of said, "Wow, I finally have an excuse to do something different." It was too easy to take the money and keep doing the same. So yeah, I went back to the UK.
Oh, good for you.
The experience in the UK wasn't great, if I'm honest, just because
During COVID.
Yeah, during COVID, just because I was just basically doing my old job but online. So I was getting paid less in a country that costs more.
Yeah.
So very difficult just to make ends meet. That was what made it so difficult.
Yeah.
But you just grab work as you can, and kind of we're stuck there a couple of years, and then once the doors were opening, I was like, yeah, I'm gonna get back out there and get some version of my old life back. Things had changed a lot in China over those 2 years, from what I heard through my buddies that did stuff.
Yeah.
And that's when I started looking around. Okay, where do I want to work? And honestly, Korea came up as one of the best options, just based on the potential to settle down.
A little closer.
Yeah, sure. Because I'm a bit older now. I'm in my 40s, and the problem with living in China, it can be quite difficult to settle down long term, because as a foreigner, you just don't have many rights.
Okay.
But Korea being a democracy and having such strong ties to the West, and also just feeling welcome in general. A few of my buddies who stayed in China, they just have this feeling that they just don't feel very welcome these days. It's like they go, they do their job, they take their money, but they don't feel welcome in where they are. That's not the same for all of them, but a few of my buddies are like that. And that's not to say that China's not a good place to work. I think potentially those issues are because they're working in the smaller cities.
Yeah.
Right, once you get to the bigger cities, things are a bit more open. You feel more welcome. But things have changed compared to when I used to work in China. I don't know why I'm chatting about China.
Yeah, no worries.
I want to ask a bunch of questions about
sure.
China, just because I think there's a lot of misconceptions. But before that,
Sure.
2 years in the UK, a lot of people use that time to re-educate, re-qualify different skills, so on and so forth. Was it a default that you just didn't want to be there and you were just putting time in until Corona ended so you could leave again? Or did you make an effort to upgrade your skills? And
You said you were looking for a change already, though, right?
Yeah, that's the thing.
Yeah.
Like, honestly, when I look back,
I just think if I went home and I indefinitely, or Madame Monsieur here, she came back from France, French boyfriend got stuck in France, she got stuck here, said, I don't know how long it's going to last.
Yeah.
I can't sit here doing nothing. I'm bleeding money. She's a baker, opened up a bakery. Now she's got one of the best spots in the city. But if I went home, I just think I'd have to start hustling. I mean, I wouldn't be able to just
slinging rocks in the corner.
Do the minimum, whatever it is required. Like you say, it's not easy. It's expensive to live, not getting paid much. Or I mean, if I could plow through a master's in 12 months or 18 months or whatever it is, you got to do something, no?
I totally agree with you. And when I look back on those 2 years in the UK, I feel like it was a waste. I could have done a lot more.
That's my entire life.
I just wonder if you had done something like that, or used your computer science degree to whatever, get on top of some AI stuff that's coming up or whatever, if that wouldn't have been the case where you want to leave again because you would set yourself up and like, shit, I kind of did a couple good things here. I don't want to leave now.
I know what you're saying. But when I went back, I did have this whole feeling of excitement. Like while I was in China, I got out of debt. I had a lot of financial debt when I first left to move to China. While I was in China, I was getting well paid, low cost living, so I was paying that debt off. The debt had been paid off. And about 6 months before I went back to the UK, before COVID, I was finally, bam, on zero. So I had about 6 months of savings when I went back to the UK. So I was like, wow, fresh start, 6 months of savings, out of debt, super excited. I was into it. And I Yeah.
Some,
I don't know, man.
some
The
guy-
excitement wears off quick of being home and the expectations and the thoughts of what it was like when you were younger or what it is like.
Yeah.
But I think, I don't know, for me, and when I go home to Canada, I see opportunity everywhere. I see I could do this, I could do that, I could do that, I could do this, I could do this. And I'm just curious, because a lot of guys who do go home struggle for the first 6 months, year, 2 years, 3 years, some guys.
Yeah.
There's lots of guys now coming back to Korea that have gone.
Yeah.
We see it on the expat dad site all the time.
Yeah.
And there's different reasons for all of those, but I don't think it would be easy, but I just think if you're willing to bust your ass, there's a lot of opportunities. If you're not picky and choosy, I won't do this, I won't do this, I won't do this, I won't do this till you get the next one. Do this and keep looking for something better. But we know guys who go home for 6-8 months a year and don't even work.
Yeah.
I mean, how can you afford to do that?
Yeah.
And what do you do for that time? If you're not upgrading yourself and your skills, you just keep I'm applying for jobs. But that's not how it works.
The problem, like, how you're talking and what you're saying, you very clearly have your head screwed on straight. And I didn't. In a nutshell.
But I think that's very, very common though.
Yeah.
That it's hard to be, and that's kind of why I like Korea, that you can kind of just do what you want. Yeah. If you want to do this, on our visas we can kind of do whatever.
And hold on, in the early throes of the pandemic too, it's not. I mean, you could have did something online, but opportunity's not screaming.
Well, look at the let's say the backward blueprint of what I did. I had this 6 months of savings. COVID happened. I went back to the UK. I had what many people would say, okay, you got a fresh start, crack on with life. And I basically just fucked around for the first couple of months because I had savings. I had no direction.
But it's unknown too. What's going to happen? You don't want to jump in with both feet into something and you get plowed over by some COVID new law or some shit,
But just to answer what Nate was saying, like, why did I go down that road? Like, I think because I wasted my time for 2 months, and then I thought, oh shit, I need a job. What do I like to do? I like teaching, but the only teaching I could do was online, and the only real opportunities for that was with the ESL. So I just defaulted to online teaching. Yeah. And then I realized quite quickly, actually, I don't like online teaching, but but I had to have some money coming in. And then I thought, well, I could make more money if I do it as a business. So I stopped teaching online for a company and I started my own business. And I did online teaching for 2 years like that. But I say business, but it's like severe air quotes here because it was basically just teaching whichever students I could get hold of. And I noticed after a month, 2 months of the initial excitement of starting the business, I didn't like doing it. And if you don't like the business you're running, it's very difficult to get the passion to keep it going.
Sure.
And not to make excuses, I should have just pulled my head out my butt and cracked on. But in the end, what happened was I ended up just doing the bare minimum to get by until I could get abroad again and take a job abroad. Yeah. And I'm not saying that, I'm definitely not saying that's the right way of doing it. I think I did everything the wrong way. I think that as soon as you land back home, you need to have some kind of plan and hustle, but I did not. So I ended up floating around till I freaked out, defaulted to what I did before, and then just cruised until I could get out. That is not a strategy for winning.
Yeah. So I think that's the most common strategy though. Yeah. I've been working hard. I'm going to go home, just chill for a month or two. Yeah. I got a bunch of money saved up. I'm not worried about that. But it's hard to get back out of that.
And the money runs out quick.
Yeah, it's hard to get out. It's hard to get out of that spot.
Dude, I see when you go on vacation too. When we go back home, it's just like, you're bleeding money.
But I always say, like, if I was at home and the right situation presented itself, I would stay.
Yeah, but you got your head straight on.
No, but I just mean, like, I don't go home with intention of staying. Yeah. But if the right situation presents itself, I could come back here, pack up, and move home. Yeah. But you have to be open or willing or looking or whatever. But
also, I noticed, like, from what we were chatting about before this started, you definitely have a positive interpretation of things back home. Like, I've got buddies who do not. They very much feel like they've burnt their bridges and now they're abroad. And I have buddies like that who think, oh my God, I'm stuck here abroad. I can't go home, which is obviously a very negative outlook. But I've also got buddies that say, wow, things are much better out here. I'm never going home because X, Y, Z. So the aversion to going back home can be in a positive or a negative light. But what you were saying, and I kind of agreed from your side as well, it is really perception. Like
that's it. That's how I've grown the last 10 years. Is just you can choose this or this. Yeah. Why would I pick the bad one? I might as well pick the positive one.
Yeah, yeah.
There's a lot of problems at home, but the problems are everywhere.
Yeah.
My director, my principal, but. Everybody has complaints about their job. But do you like what you're doing? Yeah, you got a little bit of problems with it. Who cares?
I think you got to weigh up. Like, if you weigh up your life back home, weigh up your life here. If your life here is better, there's no point complaining about what you have here because you've already made that choice. Once you make that choice, kimchi's too spicy.
And there's tons to complain about here. But there's way more amazing stuff that I enjoy here.
There's one word of warning I really want to say, just related back to what we were saying in terms of going back home to restart life in your home country. One thing that happened I was really not prepared for, reverse culture shock.
Yeah.
Like, I had culture shock when I moved to China. I was there 4 years. But then coming back to the UK, there is this thing of reverse culture shock. And it really played a part in what happened during those 2 years.
Can you give some examples of that? Because I feel weird sometimes when I go home, but I don't know exactly what the.
I think it is reverse
culture shock. I've heard it. Just another thing on that.
Yeah.
I think I've been 3 times in the last 2 years or 2.5 years, which is a lot.
Yeah.
But I think if you go regularly, it doesn't hit you as hard.
Yeah.
When during the corona, whatever, and it was like 3 years since I've been home, then it's like, whoa. But if it's 18 months, 12 months, and you kind of get like that refresher course, it's not as impactful maybe, or it doesn't affect you so much. But what are some examples you had?
Are you talking about like the price of things, or how people are, or what you remember versus how it is?
It's because you get used to a certain way of life, and that way of life is so different to the way of life back home. And whatever differences there are, it's not because I had a negative, well, I mean, maybe I did have a negative perception of life back home. I mean, I definitely prefer being abroad, but it was just so different, man. I can't describe it.
I think one of the biggest ones here is just the convenience.
Yeah, that's right.
And you know, the I don't want to say better, but the cleanliness, the mutual respect among people and stuff. Like, from riding the bus, I'd be a little bit hesitant to ride a bus in Winnipeg, Toronto, whatever.
I had that exact thing. I had that exact thing in England. Riding the bus, man, is a totally different deal.
But here the convenience of living in the city, but not exactly like, you know, we're both living kind of quieter places. But you're 5 minutes from anything you need is within 5 minutes.
Yeah.
And when you call someone for assistance, a person answers, and they talk to you within like 20 seconds of calling. Yeah. You get a customer service guy that bends over backwards and fixes your problem. One call at home to get your air miles that got screwed up because your flight got changed, whatever, is enough to send someone over the edge. It's one thing, your credit card didn't work. Well, your credit card says you're in Korea. We didn't know you're in Canada. You have to call and let us know. But okay, so I'm calling for 2 weeks to let you know, and then it's time to go home back to Korea, and my credit card didn't work yet. That stuff is enough to make people lose their mind.
Yeah.
So I think for here, the biggest thing is just convenience and ease of living. Man, everything on your phone, you can do your banking, your this, your that. I'm not saying you can't do things like that at home, but if you have one hiccup, it takes like a week of your time to fix.
Sure. How early things close was a weird one for me. Going home and like the convenience store closes at 9. Our restaurants are closing at 8. You're like, whoa, what's going on here? We usually just starting about 8 or 9. Huh?
I mean,
those people are allowed to have lives too.
Shutting things down. Like, England is notorious for everything's shut on a Sunday kind of deal. I mean, maybe it's changed now, but 10 years ago, there's very much a lot of the shops are shut on a Sunday, at least in the smaller towns. Not really in London. I think it's always open.
There was a girl from the UK.
Yeah.
But can't recall her name. I just remember the post so clearly on Ulsan Online, like, who do I call about my problem? And she went on, she's like, I'm from the UK, and you know, my apartment's here and they're doing construction next to my apartment and it's Sunday. We're like, yo, this is Korea. They're gonna do construction all day long, man.
Oh man,
she was not
impressed.
not happy about that. Who do I call about this? Like, oh,
yeah, no one.
All British Airways and get your flight home.
Yeah, there you go.
So if you had to go back,
yeah,
reflecting on it now, if you had to go back and do that again, what would you do differently?
Oh, bam, sign up at the temp agencies immediately, start working from day dot. Don't muck around. Don't sit on your butt for 2 months watching your savings dwindle. Seeing old friends for 2 months is not necessary. You schedule them in for the first 2 weeks and then you start hustling, because I tell you what, that energy dies off and you don't want to go down the road I did.
I can't believe the amount of people who go home without
a plan.
Not I don't know if it's a plan or not, but I think it's completely possible to have jobs and stuff lined up from here. At least have all your licenses, your paperwork, your whatever. You could do most of it.
Have your CV ready. You know.
You could do most of it from here. Not just a CV. I mean, you should be doing job interviews from here.
Yeah, you can.
I'm going to be there next week. Yeah. I mean,
start lining them up.
I wouldn't be going home if I didn't do 100 interviews from here. What's the point of sitting in your mom and dad's or something, doing them at home?
Dude, like before I left China, I had at least 2 weeks where I could have done all that stuff, lining it all up. It is a case of not having your head straight.
Listen, everyone, you look back, everyone's got regrets.
It's like, I've got this amount of money in the bank. Let's go home.
Read the Midnight Library. You'll feel better.
Have
you read that?
No.
Oh, it's a good one. Just the person has a chance to live all the iterations of their life that they wish they would have had. Like, if I had a band, if I did this, and then in the end she realizes,
It's not about the external, it's about the internal mindset.
Yeah, and in the end she's like, my regular life is fine. Because whatever, if you had started a business, maybe your dog would have died or something. You don't know the...
Funny you say that. There's this Taoist story I've come across a few times over the years, and I had it come up yesterday.
Love me some Taoism.
Love me some Taoism.
Yeah.
I think it was a Tao story. It's the one about the farmer.
Do we have broken leg? Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Go.
Should we
go
do
for it? Yes, absolutely.
So the farmer, the farmer loses his horse. The villagers come and say, "Oh no, you lost your horse. That's terrible." Farmer says, "Maybe."
Yeah.
We don't know yet. Comes back with 3 horses instead of. So now it's a good thing.
Yeah.
And then the kid starts riding one of the horses, breaks his leg. You know, the villagers are like, "Oh, he breaks his leg. That's terrible." The farmer's like, maybe. And then the villagers go off.
He doesn't have to go to the army or something.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, the conscription officer comes around, but because he's got a broken leg, he doesn't have to go in the army.
Yeah.
And then, this is so great. And then the farmer says, maybe. It's like you don't know where these things are going to lead you.
Absolutely.
And even breaking your arm. If you break your arm and go to the hospital and meet a nurse that ends up being your future wife, these bad things can turn into good. It's a cool story.
Yeah, absolutely.
Anyway, I kind of fucked up that story there, but there you go. That's the essence of it.
Hey, that was a group effort there.
Yeah.
Back.
No problem.
Only because it came up recently, and I think, again, I don't know. I'm lucky. I've had lots of experiences, but I've been to China 4 times, I believe, and always enjoyed my time. I find China was very different before the Olympics compared to after, and I mean it was a gong show before the Olympics, and especially Beijing and the area got really cleaned up and kind of modernized, and the middle class had grown a lot since that time. But pre-Olympics was still a wild west China compared to what it is now, I believe. But it came up recently with the TikTok thing when Biden shut TikTok off. A lot of these young people lost their source of income, their broadcasting ability on TikTok, whatever. And a bunch of them had then logged in and found alternative Chinese apps that were similar to TikTok. And what happened was they started interacting and meeting Chinese people on these Chinese apps. And a bunch of the, whatever, online platforms, news agencies, whatever, had noticed that there was a lot of friendliness going on online, that people were kind of completely blind to what China's really like, and wow, are those skyscrapers in the background? Mm-hmm. Yeah, look, 120, 130, 140 floors. But I thought China is poor, and no, this is China, and just that. And I don't know if it's an American mindset or not.
I'm worried I kind of shat on China a little bit from what I said earlier, saying that you don't feel as welcome. That was just my third-hand information from a few guys that are still there now, comparing their lives today to pre-COVID. Yeah. That is not to say that China is a bad place to live. It's not that case.
But my experiences there, probably the last one would have been a 3-day stopover, 2-day stopover in Shanghai, riding the 410-kilometer maglev from the airport to downtown in whatever 14 minutes or something. Like there and after I have a couple independent news guys I watch, and when they compare and just say, like, you know, in education, the kindergarten, you see the kindergartens with the kids bouncing 2 balls and all that stuff, and that's not every kindergarten probably there, but they're definitely ahead in a lot of areas. And if you look at competing for the Olympics, they know obviously how to train these gymnasts, the figure skaters. They're incredible at a lot of these things. And when I go there, I'm always pleasantly surprised at the amount of technology, the amount of robots, how it's evolved so much and so fast. When I go back to Canada, I'm like, nothing's changed. There's not even one new building downtown in 20 years. We still use the Via Rail that costs a fortune and takes forever. I'm not saying Canada but America has the opportunity. Yeah. New York to Miami or something should be. It's amazing that's not a route. They're putting the new train in Tokyo to Osaka, 600 kilometers an hour, the new maglev.
Jesus. Yeah, I feel like I've done a disservice to China for what I said earlier, really. That experience, the negative aspects were more for people considering settling down long term. As a 40-year-old considering where do I want to settle down if I want to settle abroad, I wouldn't choose China because of what I said before. But that's not to say China doesn't have huge advantages. I mean, God, I remember when I was first out there.
So this is I wanted you to get
the good side
from someone who lived there.
Yeah.
What it's really like, because I think I kind of feel like that when I see the guys online saying, "Hey, is that what China's really like? Wow, is that what?" I've seen some of that, and I've felt like the energy and stuff, and like, wow. That doesn't mean there's not a lot of big problems there. There are.
There's a lot of good positive stuff about China,
but I don't think people see, especially in the West, nobody gets that positive light of China.
Oh, let's hear what he's going to say.
Okay, yeah, I mean, the cities are extremely modern and clean. You've got these huge skyscrapers. You've got anything you could want, a lot of convenience. They have an app called WeChat, which is the equivalent of Kakao, which can, you can just flash your phone and pay for things with WeChat Pay. You can order stuff online. It's very convenient, and it's all mixed in with social media as well. So convenience is really high in China in general, just like it is in Korea. You've got this incredible sense of safety. This is something I never really had back home in comparison. Like, I hate to compare countries, but there you go. When I lived in Guangzhou, a very big city on the south, you could walk around the middle of the city at 3 a.m. No one will bother you. You are completely safe. At least that was the feeling I always had. You don't really see any crime happening. You don't hear much crime happening to the other foreigners. Like, after being there 4 years, I obviously know a few guys here and there. And out of all of us over 4 years, I only ever heard of one crime, and it was someone left their phone in a shopping mall. Someone had basically swiped it, and they contacted one of their friends using the phone and said, look, if you want the phone back, meet me here. And it costs, I think it was like 3,000 won, not a lot of money, to get your phone back. They met, got the phone back, and that was it. I mean, in terms of a crime, could you even call that a crime? I feel like the Chinese guy did him a service.
Yeah. I think that is similarly to here, and I think here, in terms of our lives here, a lot of the crimes are things foreigners are doing.
Yeah.
like I think of the old Tombstone days. I mean, there was guys doing crazy shit way more than any. The Korean drunk guy is kind of friendly and just on his way home.
Well,
but the foreign guy was always sniffing out a problem, looking for trouble.
Yeah.
I don't want to give foreigners a bad name here. I feel like, sorry. Yeah, I keep playing with the pen there. I don't want to give.
This guy's the worst. Clicks.
Just making little clicks.
Nady clicks.
No, I won't give foreigners a bad name abroad. In terms of what I've heard through the grapevine, very much the majority are very well behaved. I think if you go back like a few years, maybe there's more stories, or maybe I'm just not plugged into the community enough yet to hear them. But in terms of my personal experience, foreigners are pretty damn well behaved.
In China?
In China and in Korea so far. I mean, I've been here 3 years. I don't know all the ins and outs, so I'm not going to judge anyone.
I'm just saying, compared to, I'm not worried about a Korean, hurting me or assaulting me or anything. But I would be more worried about, being in Itaewon or in Busan and Somyeong or somewhere.
Probably from the tourists.
That a drunken foreigner
tourists maybe
would make a bigger problem than any Korean would.
I think the stakes are higher if you're gonna dick around in China. Like, imagine Johnny Somali going to dance on a Chinese statue, buddy. They'd be sending that guy home in a box.
Nah,
they wouldn't be.
There'd be trouble. There'd be trouble. They do stamp on crime, but this is a thing. Like, everyone kind of feels like, it's this surveillance state, and China it's. How can I describe?
Well, that was going to be my question, because that's what the West sees.
It's ridiculous.
Oh, we're going to be like China. Well, you're already like China. You're just too dumb to see that you are.
One of the stories that was doing the rounds was these police officers. Now, I would say from the start, as far as I'm aware, this never actually happened. But one of the stories that was going around in the West was Chinese police officers wearing AI glasses. And then the AI glasses would identify a person. Again, just to say, as far as I'm aware, this never actually happened. The AI glasses...
I'm going to edit that part out.
No! So these AI glasses, supposedly these coppers were wearing them, police officers were wearing them, and they would identify people walking around the airport, get their criminal records so that the police could then arrest them. And
I don't think that's a bad thing.
Well, I mean, that's another argument.
Yeah, but tricks on them. All Chinese people look the same.
Shut up. But anyway, the thing of the matter was, like, this story did the rounds in the West. Like, oh my God, AI glasses, you can't walk anywhere without being picked up for crimes you've done. Like, you have this argument Nate just made. Well, is that such a terrible thing? And that's a fair argument. But there's the other side of the coin, which this stuff never actually happened. I was in China. This never happened. They do not have police officers running around with AI glasses identifying everyone. As far as I'm aware, that never happened. And then there was also this Black Mirror episode. This
love.
Awesome, right? And they had this episode on there where they had the social scoring.
Ooh, that's a good one.
Yeah, really well done. But that extreme version from the Black Mirror episode, that does not occur in China. As far as I'm aware, there is some kind of social scoring that's happening, but as far as I'm aware, it's nothing like that Black Mirror
Can't
episode.
rent a car.
Yeah, like all that stuff. Yeah. Forget it, man. Like, you've got these perceptions of what China's like is very different to the reality, and also how we perceive our individual freedom supposedly being, pushed on by surveillance and things like that. I think one thing we need to understand is, like Nate said earlier, it does already happen in the West. It's just we're less overt about it. It kind of gets looked at behind closed doors. In China, it's very overt. It's like, we're watching, In the West, it's very much
that's just it. They just tell you what they're doing.
Yeah, in the West, it's very much like, we're not watching, but we are.
And then Edward Snowden's like, no, you are watching.
Yeah, we are watching.
Get out of the country. You're a terrorist.
Exactly. So you kind of got which system would you like? At the end of the day, surveillance is going to happen anyway. Do you want them saying, it's happening? Or do you want them saying, no, it's not happening, but it actually is?
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's kind of that's the perception I have, whether it's true or not.
How about in terms of education? Is it maybe as rigid as, the one that was making the rounds 8 months ago or a year ago was all kids have to wear the AI headband or whatever. It tells you if you're focusing, paying attention, daydreaming or something else.
I've never seen that. That's incredible.
And
it was doing the rounds.
Yeah, that was a year, maybe two ago.
It's an AI headband that tells the teacher if you're conscious?
Seen it?
No.
Oh.
No, I've never seen.
Yeah, it tells them if you're daydreaming, if you're focused, if it goes on brain wavelengths or whatever. I don't, but these, and then the kindergartens, and they're like, America's ranked 78th in the world in kindergarten education, this, that. Half our elementaries can't do math.
Yeah.
Look at the Chinese kindergartens. Every kid can dribble 6 basketballs with their toes and their nose. And is that when I think of North Korea, right? And the big show they put on every year. There's an amazing amount of skill and effort and energy that has to go into that. I'm not saying they go about it the right way, or whatever, but China also has this. When you see their parades, when you see their Olympic performances, like they can just be meticulously incredible at certain things. What is it like?
They built that wall too.
In a public school, in a academy, in general.
I mean, I never worked.
Is it the pressure of Korea, or is it different?
I never worked in the state system, and I never really taught kids. The equivalent of a Hagwon in China that I was working at the time, it was teaching adults, business professionals. The youngest you would teach were typically university students. Most of them were anything from 21 to retired. Like, we had a retired guy I used to teach, and he was great. He was just learning English as a hobby.
But you would get a lot of insight into what it's like from living there in general, right?
I mean,
if you came to Korea and you didn't teach kids, you'd still know they all wear uniforms in middle high school. You'd know they all come home at 10 p.m. at night.
Well, they don't have AI headbands.
Most of the Chinese locals I interacted with, you're looking at 21 and over. One of the things that we did hear a lot about was the Gaokao. Gaokao is the equivalent of the high school, secondary school qualifications you do before you get to university. And one of the stories that kept doing the rounds was, Gaokao is hideously difficult and very competitive, and you've got these kids staying up late studying for it. How different that is to back home, I really couldn't say. I mean, I get the feeling that maybe they were staying at their schools later, but I just can't remember now. I can't remember. I mean, we are talking about...
It's the same as here. It's the same as here.
I mean, we're talking about 5 years ago when I left China now. I never had these strong impressions of what it was like as a school child, because most of the people I was interacting with, they were university and above. Yeah. So, I guess maybe they just weren't talking about it. Those stories weren't doing the rounds. Most of my friends were working similar jobs to me, teaching adults. I think because we're teaching kids here, you hear a lot more about it. So honestly, I couldn't compare the systems. I don't know enough about it. It wouldn't be fair for me to say. And anything I say in this podcast, it's really just based on my own personal perception. So you shouldn't just take my word for it. It's just things I've heard through my very now small circle of friends who are still in China. And, the odd story that comes my way. Don't take me as an authority on China in any way,
Did you ever feel that you should be careful what you're doing, what you're saying, what you're wearing, any of that stuff? I mean, we always see the guys who are made examples of in the news, whether it's a crazy I hate Xi Jinping shirt or whatever it is. And I know during Corona, I got a bunch of buddies there too, and they teach and they play hockey. And anyway, but I seem to feel that they live just like the same life I live here, and that there's no other feeling of being watched all the time or anything different than it would be living here or Japan.
I got a hometown friend there too. He said, "Brian, I live in an apartment that's too big for me. I pay peanuts. Yeah. I get delivery food three times a day. It's wonderful. It's impossible to move.
Okay, when it comes down to are there things you should or shouldn't say or message in China?
I don't mean should or shouldn't. I think in every country there probably is. But do you feel that? Do you feel like you're always where was I?
Do you feel like there's someone hanging over your shoulder, like, we shouldn't do that?
Okay, so in terms of like the feeling of Big Brother, like how realistic is that? The only time that really affected me was we were told during the training the 2 weeks before I started work, and we weren't even told by in any official capacity. It was almost just conversationally. There are certain things you shouldn't talk about when you're at your job, but it was a handful of things. So, for example, it was, the
inefficiencies of the Communist Party.
I mean, they basically said, look, do yourself a favor, avoid talking about politics. They never said don't. They just said avoid. And it was never said in any official capacity.
Religion, education, all the things.
It was just kind of mentioned casually. Yeah. It wasn't like, you must not do this, you must not. It was never like that. It was just like, do yourself a favor, don't rile anyone up. Kind of thing.
But here, given the current situation here, I mean, I think any foreigner could say whatever they want about Yoon Suk-yeol. Is not a big deal.
Dude, I almost started a fight in my class.
But I have a feeling like on that, I don't know where the line is in China, or if there's a line. But if you said something stupid about the CPP, I assume you are on social media or something, then you probably might want to watch out. I don't know.
We're looking for trouble.
What's that famous event that happened with the
Tiananmen?
There you go, bam. Yeah. So that one of the guys at Foreigner told me. He said, "Look, whatever you do when you start working, don't talk about that." And don't talk about politics, because...
You ever seen this picture? What's going on here?
Well, basically, that event is just not talked about, let's say.
Yeah.
And the messaging system I mentioned earlier, WeChat, the equivalent of Kakao in China, I heard of some guys saying that if you send certain
target
stickers
words
or memes, you can send like little funny emojis and stuff.
Yeah.
Like, apparently there are a few of those on the platform that were banned, and if you tried to upload them and send them, they would just get blocked. Silly things like there was one where, I can't remember now. It was just a thing that China didn't want sent around. And it's very light. For me to say that there's no Big Brother feeling at all would not be truthful. But for me to say that I was living in fear of my life is ridiculous.
But I think for the average, especially this guy, or maybe me to a lesser extent, but going there, those would be a couple of things that probably you might spit out by accident and go, oh shit, you can't say that here.
It's not as simple as that. It's more a case of who are you saying it to, under what circumstances. Right. If you're having a private conversation with a student, and you've been teaching that student for donkey's years, I don't see it as really a massive issue. A few of us did, once we made friends with some of the older students, especially the business owners.
That'd be my first questions for every guy. What do you think about this? What do you think about that? Give me the insights.
The things that we're told not to mention casually, let's say, you're probably going to want to ask, because it's like that whole thing, don't think of a pink butterfly, you think of the pink butterfly. Yeah. So there was one story I heard. I don't know if I should share it or not. Now I've said that, obviously I'm going to have
to. You're bound.
Bound by... So, okay, I'll tell you the basics and just skim over it. There was a VIP student I had, and she told me in confidence that she had an aunt who... You remember the whole one-child policy in China. Now, I don't know what the perception of it was over here, but the perception I had of the one-child policy was very much a, if you have more than one kid, then you just get taxed more, and you have financial, let's say, pressure not to break that policy. It was a financial pressure rather than anything too hardcore.
My understanding was all government officials had 2 and 3 kids.
Well, I don't know all the ins and outs, but that was a perception I had. I didn't know if it was true or not, but then what this student told me, it was a little shocking, and I don't know how true it is. Again, I'm not going to mention any names, and it could have just been made up. So I'll just tell you what they said. They said that she had an aunt who basically she'd already had a kid, and she was pregnant with, I think it was actually not the second, it was the third. So she'd already broken the one-child policy once. She had 2 kids, and she was pregnant with the third. And the story goes that she'd been pregnant for a few months, and she was basically, she was forced to have an abortion.
Really?
So I don't know how true that story is. That's what I heard through a student. I don't know how legit it all is. But we're talking about something that happened 20, 30 years ago. Yeah. So it's not like it's happening today. And obviously, I think one-child policy has been abolished anyway.
No, now they're paying you to have more kids. They have the revert. So that 30, 40 years of that created a huge problem now.
Again, that is very much... that's something I cannot substantiate. That's just something I heard.
Yeah.
I don't know.
But I think there's a bazillion of those stories from that time.
From that time.
I used to
30 years ago.
the way they portrayed it in the West was that, basically you're going to get killed if you have more than one kid. It's not allowed. But from going there, from talking, reading, getting older and learning, it seems like it was just a financial thing. If you didn't have money to take care of it, you weren't really allowed to have it. But if you had the financial means, a lot of government officials have more than one kid.
You heard it here first. Dean watched and filmed.
This is something I heard. I cannot substantiate. And we're talking like 40 years ago, 30, 40 years ago. Oh my God, they're going to pick me up.
So it's kind of now what the situation is here without government enforcement. The one-child thing. I mean, there's so many ways the things that relate to the one kid here, because none of my students have more than like 2 cousins. I'm like, 2 cousins? 2? Well, I don't have a brother or sister. My dad's brother only has 1 kid and his sister's not married. I'm like, you only have 1 cousin? How is that possible? But it's kind of, and now, lots of the homes are too big because people did used to have 3 kids, and now they have 0 or 1. Yeah. You don't need 40 pyong anymore, and it's such a huge impact on the whole way of living. Yeah. But to see kids who have no cousins or 1, it's really, really weird. Yeah. And I have 4 brothers and sisters, and they all have kids, so we still have quite a few cousins. But man, it's weird here. Did you notice it? Do you notice it there? People say that the birth rate's falling here, but I'm like, depends where you are. But sometimes you just see so many kids, and you're like, come on, there's no way the birth rate's falling. And other places you go, and you're like, where's the kids? But what's it like in general there, and working with adults? Is it, everybody's an only child?
Well, again, like I was mostly dealing with, university business professionals. But I tell you, actually,
that's what I mean. Those would have been the product of the one-child policy, right?
Yeah, and
none of those guys would have brothers or sisters.
A lot of the students I had were female, and a lot of those students were actually not a lot. I would say, out of the adults between 30 and 50, I would say a good portion of them were actually housewives learning English as a hobby. And from the impressions I got, they all had kids. So, and more than 1. So, it's like, but then, I mean,
so you're saying they can't count?
I'm saying, like, that was my personal experience out of like 30 people. I mean, 30 people who were very wealthy. It was typically the wealthy ones learning English. 30 people from the wealthier end of society can hardly be compared to the billions of people that live in China. Yeah. So again, it's like these perceptions and stories that come from people who live abroad, even from myself, you really have to take with a goddamn bucket of salt, because it's not statistically viable to say the country's like this.
Did you travel around lots while you were there?
I went to Shanghai. I went to Chongqing, Guangzhou, Shanghai, Macau, Hong Kong.
My follow-up was going to be about when you get out of the big cities, what's it like?
Yeah, I know. It was always big cities I went to be honest. I didn't do the whole smaller city thing. I wish I had done that more.
Because part of I like going to the countryside in Korea, like even though now mother-in-law's place there is too developed, but for the first 5-8 years of marriage, it was still like the old countryside where people, skip school to harvest the rice, and it was just a completely different life of what you see in the city.
Well, the life you'd see outside of the city is typically the perception that's plugged back home. I remember before I went to China, I watched this documentary in the UK about what's life like in China. And the whole goddamn time they were focusing on these people, doing farming and saying how wonderful it was they were using pig crap to fertilize their fields. And I'm like, this is not China. Why are you plugging this perception of China, of farmers, in the countryside? Like, when you go to the big cities, they rival the Western cities. They are cleaner, nicer, and given a choice in general. Like, I hate to compare cities, but in general, like, because I spent so much time, I mean, I lived in London for 4 years before I went to China, and I got to say, I've really preferred my time spent in cities in China rather than London. But maybe a lot of that was because it is so much more expensive, and I was hanging around the less well-off areas. You know, there are less.
But the cities at home seem expensive. They seem more dangerous. They seem more dirty and unkept.
Yeah, but that's probably because I was living in the poorer parts because I didn't have enough money to live in the good parts. But in China, I had the money to live in the good parts, so I was seeing the good parts more. Maybe that's what it was. Again, it's like, you know, I'm judging from the perception of myself, and there were poorer, dirtier parts of all of these cities.
Sure.
It's not like they're all heavenly. So this is the thing.
I found a couple of those with AJ and Pete.
When you have an expat,
especially AJ,
when you have an expat say, look, you know, the cities are cleaner and nicer. Well, maybe that's because they actually have the money to go in the nicer parts.
Yeah.
But back home we don't. So maybe that's why. You know.
Last one before moving on.
Yeah.
Shout out to Ricky Duff. Just got to China, encountering all kinds of problems again. But someone had mentioned, you know, I can't get a hold of you or I can't reach you. And he said, well, I can't use Gmail, I can't use Facebook, I can't use any of my normal ways to communicate without a VPN.
Yeah.
And some reason the VPNs here are harder to use. Anyways.
That's a real thing.
My buddies there that work, and I played hockey with them in Korea before they moved there and still keep in touch. Those things are our daily challenges. The communication with the West and what is restricted or what is allowed.
Okay.
Can you just touch on the realities of that?
Yeah, sure. So from my own experience when I was living in China, the main disadvantages were around those areas, what we would call the Great Firewall of China. Basically Facebook, Google, all that stuff is blocked off from normally accessing, and you can access it using a VPN, which is strictly speaking illegal, but from my experience I didn't really police that. Maybe they do now. But the thing which doesn't get talked about is that when I used to live in Guangzhou, I remember there's a 2-week period where I believe Xi Jinping went to visit the city. And while that visit was going on, a lot of these VPN services were interrupted. You could not use your normal VPN to access Facebook and Google. It was just somehow they had another layer of security which could mess it up. So yeah, the Great Firewall of China is a real thing and certainly something I experienced while I was there. But other than that period of 2 weeks, the VPN would typically work and you could access that stuff. What was the other thing? There's something else I was going to
Is the average Chinese person also using a VPN to access Western media, news, etc.?
Well, again, most of the locals I was interacting with, they were the wealthier ones because they were the ones that could afford to do the English classes and stuff. And from the impression I got, I think a fair few were probably using VPNs. It was necessary in order to access the Western services.
I imagine the youth there have all been onto it for years. But
well, yeah, that's the thing though. Because I never really interacted with the youth that much, I can't really comment.
Yeah.
I will say though, as I mentioned before, it's difficult to live. When I was making that decision to go back to China or not, one of the things that did make me shy away from going back was the level of bureaucracy and how that applies to foreigners. Let me give you a key example. I booked a hotel to stay in a different city, and I think it was staying in Chongqing. It's a big city, and it was near the center, so you'd think all the licenses and things would be up to scratch. But let me explain. For a hotel to allow a foreigner to stay there, in that particular city, they were supposed to have what is equivalent of a license to allow foreigners to stay in your hotel. Now, from what I understand,
Q-tip in the bum.
Well, from what I heard later, it's actually not a difficult thing to arrange. Just a lot of businesses don't bother because some cities just don't get that many foreigners. Like Chongqing at the time, we were talking like 10,000 foreign expats out of a city of millions. So a lot of them just don't bother doing the paperwork. So because of that level of bureaucracy, what happened, I booked this hotel, got there, and they said, oh, I'm sorry, we don't have a foreigner license, so you can't stay here. And I'm like, well, damn, like I'm on the doorstep, it's 10 p.m. at night, where the hell am I going to go? And fortunately, they were very helpful and found a local hotel with a foreigner license so I could stay there. So
that's hilarious.
In the end, it was not a problem, but you can see, like, this is obviously not a good situation for foreigners. The bureaucracy really interrupts your life. Let me give you another example. So I mentioned before WeChat, the equivalent of Kakao Talk in China. You could use WeChat Pay to pay for things like flash your phone with the WeChat code and then you pay for your coffee at Starbucks or whatever. One day I went to Starbucks and I held up my phone for it to pay, and they
white man.
And basically it failed, and I held it to the clerk, who fortunately could speak a little bit of English, and she said, or the barista, and she said, oh, you have to fill in this, you have to press this and fill in the form. So I pressed this button, and it basically, in order for me to use WeChat Pay to pay for my coffee that day, I had to fill out all this damn form with my passport number and there was information I didn't have on hand. So if it's just so lucky I had cash on me at the time, so I guess okay, forget WeChat Pay, I'll just pay in cash. So, but imagine for a moment, you needed to pay for something with this very convenient thing, and it just said, oh, sorry, you can't use it right now. You have a number of bureaucratic steps to jump through, or hoops
Send
to
us a
jump
dick
through.
pic for confirmation.
Well, yeah, and it's like, I mean, damn, give us some warning. At least send a warning, hey, your WeChat's not going to work on this day until you fill out all this crap. It's like, it was stuff like that. It's like, China's a very convenient place to live, but every now and then you get these bureaucratic hiccups with no warning that just flash up, that just make your life a bit difficult. And when I said earlier, I think I said, foreigners have no rights. I think that was just a bit of it's not quite as bad as
Remember
that.
that day at Starbucks?
I tell you one thing that you should bear in mind: property. As far as I'm aware, you cannot own freehold property in China. So again, if you want to settle down permanently, there's a 99-year-old lease. But again, I think once you've been there for a few years, you figure out there are ways to deal with that. But one story I did hear, which again, going back to the whole, foreigners have no rights, I don't think it's as bad as that. But if you want to settle in China long term and potentially retire, I would really do your research. That's why I just thought, I'm just going to go for a different country this time.
Are there many expats there who have married Chinese men or women?
Out of my friends that are still back home, I know one that did, and he's got kids, and he'd been there about 12 years, and he went back to Canada for 2 or 3 years, and then he married this girl, and he moved back out to China last year, and he's pretty damn happy. He's got a good job, good money coming in, low cost of living, he's married with kids. I think he's doing really well, especially compared to his life in Canada. But again, it's like, that's just for him. I'm sure there are people in Canada who made it where he couldn't. But he's a very happy chap. And that, I think if you're willing to get married to a local and settle down and have kids, a lot of these concerns about the foreigner bureaucracy, let's say, they kind of disappear. But then your stability is based on your marriage. You have to appreciate marriages might not always work out long term, and then what happens? And I don't know how legit these stories are, but I have heard through the grapevine of, they've got married, had kids, settled down in China, they get a divorce, and then basically everything has just gone to the wife and they're left on their tot. I don't know how legit that is. Again, this is a story I heard from a friend of a friend. It was that kind of a thing. So do your research if you're looking to settle down. Is what I'm saying.
All right, that's enough about China. That's enough about China, man. Tell me about your computer science degree and how relevant it still is.
Well, without a degree, you cannot get an ESL job here, so it's relevant for that, and I'm very grateful for that. To actually have the opportunity to live and work abroad. I did work as a software engineer for a very short time, software tester for a short time. I went into sales and climbed up into IT sales. I was doing selling servers, data storage, networking.
VPNs.
You're on the way. This is boring stuff. And so it was kind of relevant and then very useful when I decided to work abroad.
I wish I had I joke because technology develops so quickly, but I wish I had more of a foundation in understanding of computers and whatnot. I think what you learn in school is probably very common knowledge now for most people.
I mean, my degree, I think I graduated 2007, I think. So we're talking, it's a little bit out of date now, really. I mean, we're talking like 18 years ago. I mean, we did do some C++, which is still relevant today. We did some Java, which is, it's pretty relevant. There's JavaScript still very popular. I couldn't really comment, though. I'm just not in the industry anymore. I did do a bit of coding for fun with there's an open source game engine called Godot, and I think there's a competitor called Rudo now. That was a bit of fun, just mucking around in that.
But you got your feet wet, and that can that gives you a good foundation. Now you're going into development and whatnot, and that gives you a good foundation to launch from, right? Better than starting from zero, I mean. Yeah, I mean, it's nice to have that behind me. Yeah. I mean, what I want to do next is like a little side, because whatever your main job is, I always feel like you got to have a side project of some kind, not necessarily to earn money, but at least a hobby or something you want to do that's creative. Yeah. Because one of the things I mentioned before we started was to really get across, avoid the expat train wreck life, let's say. Sure. And I think a lot of us have been through it at some point where you're suddenly in a living situation where you have a decent amount of expendable income. And some people, myself included at the start, you gravitate towards drinking, bars, and just mucking around or playing computer games all the time and just going through that kind of waste of life. And you've got to get out of that. I don't
know if that's called a waste of life.
That was 2007 to 2000.
I got a legendary decade in there. I wouldn't call that wasted.
Yeah, I mean, it's not wasted, is it? It's just like I judge myself too harshly, so I don't want to judge others. But like, I see that as like, dude, don't waste all your money on alcohol and don't waste all your time on computer games and all that stuff. You have a fantastic opportunity where you have expendable income and a fairly comfortable lifestyle. You can do something with that now. But
man, you can argue
it was only $1 a bottle. Guys at home are wasting their money. I
think everyone goes through that.
I was cherishing the $1 a bottle.
Yeah. I mean, we all go through it. And like when I was in China, sorry, just very quickly, briefly touch on it. I was spending probably more money at the bar than I was on rent. Easily, because rent is like 20-25% of your post-tax income. Yeah. In the UK, rent is typically, for me, it was about 70% of my post-tax income. Wow. So to go from like the majority of your money going on rent to just less than a quarter of your money going on rent after income tax, it's like, wow, like I have money now. Yeah. So, but you got to be careful with it. You got to put that stuff in savings, man. You do not know what's going to happen in the future.
That's you can't be too YOLO, but you I don't know. Man, it's hard. I'm totally on the fence. I wouldn't trade the early years here.
Yeah,
we still save money, but
fun. You've got to do it. I think it's fun. Just don't do it too long.
And you might look back if you were hyper focused or whatever. You might look back and regret not doing it. Right?
Yeah.
What about the boys in Thailand and Philippines who started again at 50 to do it again? They go 50 to 70. They go back on the horse and
my liver's still crying
and start doing it again.
I met someone like that. They basically. They were in their 40s. They had about 10 grand saved up, and they were just like, throw all your toys out the pram and just like went to Thailand to basically drink themselves to death. And he was lucky in that
he had 8 grand left.
Well, I mean, he blew all his money, and then he's in Thailand with no money. And fortunately for the guy, he actually met a decent lady who kind of just sorted him out, gave him a few slaps around the face. He got a job, got some money.
He had to pay for that
finally, too. Let's not go there. But
Nate's rental car in Thailand. Did he tell you about that?
No.
A rental car?
Yeah.
I never rented a car in Thailand.
You were up in Chiang Mai and you rented the car. No?
No. Motorcycles? I don't know. I've never rented a car.
Look, when you got stranded.
No.
You blew a tranny.
You blew a tranny? We're talking about cars, right?
Chiang Mai. If you said Angeles City, Philippines or something, maybe it would have been more believable. But
those transaxles, man. Watch out for those.
How connected are you still now to all the development going on? Are you pretty up to date? Do you read? Do you follow? Do you still use your skills? Or
I did a 6-month stint where I was kind of mucking around in Godot. It's just a game engine for software development. I was making like fun little 2D games. I was mucking around with that for about 6 months, but I guess what I came to realize was that why am I trying to learn how to make games when I spend so much of my time addicted or hooked on games when I was younger? I do not want to provide that, let's say, problem to people who are in my similar position to me. I'm not going to demonize games. They are very useful and helpful and they're fun. But for me personally, I just took them too far. And
and it doesn't help. They're engineered to totally hook you in, man.
I mean, you say they're engineered to hook you. In one light, I agree. In one light, I disagree. I disagree in that if you're making a movie, you want to make the best movie you can.
Yeah.
So thus, that movie becomes a hook. Thus, someone could get addicted to it.
Okay.
I would say that philosophy could be applied to gaming. I'm not going to demonize games, but I will say that for certain people like myself, they are very much a hook, and they want to make them like more addictive. Air quotes. It's a very subjective thing.
So
it's a very subjective thing.
Just growing up, I played Sega Genesis. You die. Well, I had Nintendo 64 too, and I think Zelda caught me there for a little while. But
the old Ocarina. Yeah.
Oh, dude, I got fond memories of this. And looking back, I don't, spending a whole winter vacation playing that and having buddies come over and like that's a really good memory that I still incredible. You explained to me a few months back about it was back to like Sega Genesis or when you die in a game, or even if you're playing Super Mario, you like start from the beginning again. And there's that like, I gotta run through levels 1-1 again.
You gotta earn it.
And you do. And there's
unless A-B, select start, A, B.
Up, down, left, right, jump off the top of the screen and skip the first few levels.
Sure. There's that, but I mean, there is that, the feeling of like, I gotta restart through the whole mission again, where in my mind, it was hard to understand. You're playing Mortal Kombat. The guy with 4 arms, Goro, he kills you, and you're like, you know what? I'm physically, mentally exhausted of playing this game, and it's easy to turn off. You explained to me months ago, I think it was World of Warcraft, about how it kind of hooks you. Can you... Do you remember the story that you told me about about having a team and getting together?
Raiding,
Can you tell that story? That was
sure, man.
It really that hit deep, and I understood a little more.
Computer game addiction, like this is a thing. Like for me personally, I found it very addictive. And I don't want to demonize any game or computer games. They really serve a purpose. But for me personally, I really got too hooked on it. I nearly buggered up my whole degree. That's a solid look, my friend. I nearly buggered up a lot of my life, and I think I could have done a lot better in my youth had I not been playing those games.
Sure.
But again, that was on me to a certain extent.
Pick your poison, man. I mean, people were smoking weed, doing drugs, drinking too much. What is
a habit or a pastime for one person could be an addiction for another. Absolutely. I believe that computer games were an addiction for me at that time. But that, again, it's my own perception. That's how I saw it. And, before I went to China, I think it was 2015, I wrote a little book about computer game addiction.
What's the name?
Well, it's not online anymore, but what I'm going to do is chop the book up, make it into blog posts and put that online. And I want to put that... I've registered the domain name for the website. It's deanwoot.com, DeanWoot.com.
Dean Woot?
Yeah, that's the domain name I registered. I want to put all this information up on a blog, and basically it's just the journey I went through from falling into all these little holes of, let's say, computer game addiction, and how I just had to climb out some of those holes, And I'm not going to tell anyone what they should or shouldn't do. I'm just going to relate the story of what I went through and how I got out of it, because I can tell you from what I remember very clearly finding it very difficult to stop playing games and build a fairly normal life, let's say, with activities and sports and hobbies and friends in the real world. Like, I was hooked on just pressing that button, loading up my computer and sitting on it for hours. Like, there was this one crazy 3-day period. I just played constantly for 3 days, no sleep, barely leaving the room to just like make some food very quickly.
Change
just
your diaper.
What kind
change my diaper, right?
What kind of games are we talking about?
That game was World of Warcraft back in 2004 or 5. It was around the time where they went from vanilla to Burning Crusade. It was like the first expansion, and I was totally hooked on that thing. And one of the big hooks of it was raiding. That's where you get together with like...
this is the one I'm talking about.
Okay,
Nate,
so the raiding...
Nate, listen to this shit.
So raiding is where, at least it was back then, when you would get together with... Well, you would have a group of 40 people online, and I think we were using TeamSpeak or Ventrilo back then. It's basically voice software, so you could chat to each other online all in a big group.
And this is people from all over the world.
All over the world, yeah. I mean, they're typically from the States, I think I was playing with at the time. And you go down into Molten Core. It's just like the name of a raid. And there's 40 guys all shooting the shit, having fun, larking about. And then, it gets more serious and you start fighting these enemies together. And then it becomes like... your goal in life to down this boss. You know, I think the end guy was called Ragnaros or something. And we were hooked on it, man. It was so silly, but it was so much fun. Imagine having 40 guys or like 40 people just all having fun together, and it's just like a really good crack, and you're trying to achieve something together as well. Like, at first it's fun and mucking around, but then when you go past that line of you're not having fun, you're trying to achieve this goal together as a group. It takes a different flavor, and it was very addictive to me. And I just wish that I had just applied the ambition of trying to down that boss to my own life in terms of getting ahead personally. And that was one of the big things. And to get off that game, I really had to take it in stages of like, get away from raiding, get away from going to smaller raids, get away from playing the game in certain ways that was too social, let's say, because your friends just end up becoming the people online rather than the people in your real life.
You're saying too, when you're fighting a boss, you have 40 people and everyone has like
roles,
their own role that they have to execute at a certain time.
At a certain time, yeah.
Like, that's incredible.
Well, you'd have these phases of the boss, right?
Yeah.
And during each phase, different people had to do different things. So, like, for example, if you're playing a mage, they might have to do something called decurse, which is remove these debuffs or problems from other players. Instead of focusing on damaging the boss. Because if certain players were just focused on damaging the boss instead of helping the other people in the raid during that phase, then you would probably fail and wipe, as we say, which means all the players would die. And then when you get to the next phase, they have to switch their role. Instead of decursing, they would have to attack the boss to get the necessary DPS or damage per second in order to get them through that phase very quickly. We'd call that like the burn down phase. You have to have high DPS from everyone during that phase. But that's just like I don't want to get too into that shit, to be honest, but it's like that.
But that's just from an outside perspective, I can see how it's addicting, or that it pulls you in. You feel like I'm part of the team. I gotta put my contribution in. Yeah.
You got to put in, and it's like that. It's like how we used to say crack for geeks. You know, but. Yeah, it is. So I do want that website to help people out of those little pitfalls. DeanWoot.com, DeanWoot.com. I want to get it going in April 2025 is the goal. So I've still a couple of months to get some stuff ready.
Yeah.
I think if I think of addiction or game addiction, I'm not almost never like we got the Nintendo 64. No, we got the original Nintendo after Nintendo 64 came out, and everyone's like, the Nintendo's shit. Anybody want this? $10 with 20 games. Okay, we'll try it. And we had 5 kids. Yeah. But we lasted like 1 or 2 weeks. It was just way more fun playing outside on the outdoor rink or whatever. And it just didn't take in our house. We would watch wrestling on Saturdays, maybe get one game of Mario and go, I suck at this, or what. Contra, we used to play Contra. But it never lasted longer than like a week or a day or a rainy day or whatever. That was it. That was kind of it. A rainy day maybe.
Again, this is why it's such a subjective thing.
Yeah. So we had exposure to them, duck hunt. But it was just never, we were too engaged in sports and playing outside, I think. But 2 or 3 games that I think that maybe had a small addiction to, Minesweeper. Is that what's called, Minesweeper?
Yeah, the free one on Windows.
The free one on Windows from like 100 years ago. Like there was only 2 games or something.
Space Cadet
Minesweeper and Solitaire.
But like right there here,
Space Cadet Machine.
Solitaire. Solitaire and Minesweeper. And it was just me and the computer, no one pissing me off. I was in the basement. And I could play for like 5 or 6 hours. I just want to win Minesweeper. Yeah. And you have to, they were intellectual. It wasn't shooting, killing, whatever, first player, whatever. It was just these games of me in my mind trying to beat that freaking computer. And one night,
don't know how to play that.
Can you ever beat that was the other one. Most people don't know how to play that Minesweeper and how to understand what it means. I used to love those 2 games. Yeah. And then I probably never played another game until we had kids. Candy Crush. My mom and my sister came for the first kid, and they just sat there and played this Candy Crush all freaking day. I was like, what is it? Like, do it a little bit. I was like, whatever. Yeah. And they had brought a new iPad over. And I think the iPad came with Candy Crush on it or something. And those nights in the middle of the night when the kids are crying, and I'm just walking around the house with a kid here, and I'm crushing over
crushing candy.
And then it was I was doing Candy Crush and rocking a baby in this arm, and it was like I'm up at 3 in the morning, 4 in the morning, but like I might as well do something than just hold the kid.
Just zapping your
So I'm not going to be studying a master's at 4 in the morning, 5 nights a week. So it was have this kid, and it just was something that made holding a crying baby not so crazy. And I would do that stupid Candy Crush. And I think that Anypong was a phone one like that for a while on Kakao or something. But other than those 3 episodes, which were just like brief stints of whatever, like staying up late by yourself when you're 15 or 13 or whatever. And there wasn't games like you couldn't really. I didn't want to go sit on the sofa and play. It was just everything black except this Minesweeper, and I'm gonna beat the computer this time. And probably 30 years until Candy Crush hit me for about 6 months there.
Well, again, this is really feeding into the whole it's the subjective experience, because if you read Masters of Doom, it's like this kind of autobiography about the guys who made the first Doom. You look at the original Doom today, oh man, it's really dated, right? But back then, there were guys staying up till 5, 6 in the morning playing this naked, doing these like funny little parties. They were hooked. Like people who were getting A's in school every day went from A's to failing because they were so hooked on Doom. So again, it's like, these things like Minesweeper, Doom, these older games, it was still had the potential to be addictive back then. It was based on your subjective experience. I think because you had such a good grounding in sports and getting outside that it never took for you. But for me, my subjective experience was so much horrendous perhaps because I was such a geek and so socially cut off.
What year were those common around, or what years were those
early
popular?
2000s,
I think it was early 90s for the first Doom. But I mean,
are you talking about Doom or his...
No, whenever, because my point was going to be, everyone had access to Nintendo and Nintendo 64 when I grew up, and Atari.
But like I said, it's different. It's a different experience.
No, but most people weren't. I don't think addiction was really a thing to computer games then.
That's where I would disagree, perhaps, because you just weren't around people who are addicted.
Right.
When you look at the Doom and what the impact it had on people around the time. My God, I mean, they actually said as part of their marketing, this will be the #1 distraction for employees around the world in a funny way, and I'm not demonizing Doom, a game about demons.
maybe I'm thinking about like in a percentage wise, where now I feel like all the youth are addicted to some form of.
I think it's been going on since. Dude, it's been going on since day dot. It's been going on since day dot, and I think again, it's not that games are bad. It's just a subjective thing. It's how you're spending your time, how you erase your own situation. Because I can tell you, from what I understand, back then, Doom was just addictive for certain elements of the society, just as World of Warcraft is addicted for certain elements of society today. I think perhaps the technology has grown and become potentially, air quotes, more addictive or more engaging. But again, it's like, how do you perceive that? Do you perceive it like a master crafter making a very, very good movie? Is that movie more addictive, or is it just a good quality movie?
But also maybe more variety?
Yeah, more
like
variety.
If you, I don't know what Doom is, but if you didn't like Doom, or you weren't into, if it was a killing game or a strategy game, and you didn't like that, now there's something for everybody.
Yeah.
And from 10, 15 years ago, there's something for everybody.
Well,
right?
look at what you said earlier. You said how Minesweeper was, you could have spent hours on Minesweeper, right? That is a more strategic game. It's
Don't play
engaging
Doom.
different parts. It's engaging different parts of your brain, and it's appealing to certain people more than perhaps Doom would.
Yeah.
So again, it's all about the subjective experience.
Yeah.
I mean, for me, because I felt like I was a bit of a, socially cut off, very geeky kid, I retreated into computer games very early on, and that is perhaps why I was more susceptible to computer game addiction later on in life. So again, it's just so subjective. I think it's not accurate to say that addiction in general is worse these days. I don't know, maybe it is, but for someone, I think you've got to take into account this stuff was always potentially addictive to some group of society at some point. I think that's more fair to say.
I had two, not Doom, what's the other one? Diablo.
Yeah, Diablo.
Are those similar?
Yeah, Diablo is not. Doom was more of a first-person shooter. Diablo was kind of a hack and slash. It was,
okay.
It is different. Again, they were both kind of like strategy was not intense. But I mean, back then you had the original StarCraft. I mean, look at how many people got hooked on StarCraft.
Dude,
even in Korea,
it's a TV show. It's a 24-hour.
Yeah, esport, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that stuff was taken off back then.
I had two buddies. One from home, and actually Jeffy said here, Mikey gave him a Diablo CD one time. He's like, I played it, and I looked, I was like, it's 7 a.m. Holy shit, and he threw it away.
I'll tell you one way that technology has changed to open the doors to more people to potentially be addictive, let's say. That would be the social element. Like when I was chatting earlier about raiding, trying to achieve a goal with 39 other people. That was not available back then. I mean, people. I knew a guy who wired up a LAN in his house at university, local area networks. They could all play together. But it was, then later you could go on, was it Dwango, so you could play Doom online. But again, that still wasn't MMO level, where you could potentially live a second life online. I think that potential is viable, it's happening. I felt at one point in my life, I can honestly say, the development of my character on World of Warcraft was more important to me personally than my own personal development.
Than the real Dean.
Yeah, because I was buggering off. I wasn't going to lectures. I wasn't doing my work, and I would rather develop my character.
Yeah.
So it's just crazy.
South Park did
imagine,
make love not war, right?
Imagine how much harder it is now for these young guys.
Yeah.
Born with phones, non-stop gaming on your phones all day long. It's wild, man.
It's very acceptable. But then there are other vices as well. That's why I always say it's very subjective.
Yeah.
So, and also just to, look at the benefits of gaming, let's say. It was in a way a kind of method of self-medicating loneliness and the feeling of being cut off from having any friends. Like for a geeky social outcast that I hopefully can say was, computer games helped me make friends online. They helped me interact with people. They're definitely, I think a good way of looking at computer games is potentially as a medicine, let's say. When you are a geeky cut-off guy and you don't have the confidence to go out and make friends, there's two philosophies. Shut off all the technology, kick them out the door so they have to do it, or let them retreat and play games and just have some fun. It's very difficult to make that choice, because honestly, if someone said to me back then, oh, we're going to turn off your World of Warcraft and you have to go out and actually do something with your life, I don't know what the hell I would have done. I think my brain would have exploded because I was so hooked on it.
Do you think that's more relevant then to now? Because in a class at the uni, if I say how many of you guys play whatever, League of Legends, Warcraft, it's probably like 90% of the hands go up. And they're not all geeky. They're not all geeky social outcasts. I think it's a way society has shifted. That
dude, I saw the shift.
It's the majority Now it's not a geeky social outcast guy. It's kind of like I'm weird for not understanding or knowing. And when you talk about the benefits, like these guys and their English, and it's like how do you know these words, or how do you know that expression? Like League of Legends chat room or something. Like, and they play with guys all over the world, and like they know them. They surprise me all the time with this shit.
Don't like, use the C word in my class.
Did you go to English Hog One? Nope. I play computer games and I chat with American guys every night.
Talk about the shift that you saw?
Oh yeah, I don't know how many people experienced this because it was such a short period of time and it was very much a personal perception again. But I remember when I was at school, there were a little group of us who used to play games at the weekend. And we would not talk about it with other kids at school out of fear of being even more socially outcast as the geeks, you know. And I remember very quickly, over a period of months, the cool kids in school were talking about these games they were playing, and suddenly we were like, oh shit, we can talk about that stuff now. We're not geeky social outcasts. So it actually even had a way to connect with the cool kids. You know? It was like, oh yeah, we were doing it before the cool kids. Maybe we're not, we're geeky social outcasts. You know? But I don't know how many people experience that, but to actually see that shift happen so quickly from, oh, you're a geeky social outcast if you play games, to, oh, actually everyone's doing it.
Takes hold quick. I remember seeing it quick, man.
Just a recent anecdote from someone I know that was hanging out with some sports players and you know, asking about the social life now of young professional sports players making millions of dollars, this, that, and said like they can't go out. Lots of them can't go out because they're easily recognized and harassed or whatever. They're very limited in what they can do in the general public because of the fame that they have, and they don't go drinking.
Yeah.
They play computer games. They go home, order their DoorDash, skip the dishes, whatever, and play computer games. You're 19, 20, 25, 26, single.
Good for reaction time.
What are you going to do?
Yeah.
And he said it's a problem. Like these guys rip out of practice to race home to improve their characters.
Yeah.
And it's like they care more about. And you see the guys in the NBA. They're like Patrick Laine got traded from the Jets. He was like one of the top 5 guys in the world or something at one of these games. He's like, he was the best pure goal scorer for 2 years in the NHL, and he's also like a top 5 whatever game. And some of these, I don't know if it's LeBron or somebody else, and they're legends in these games. One of the tennis guys, wasn't it?
Don't know.
One of the best tennis guys was a top 3 player in the world at one of these games, and it's amazing now because these guys are born and raised with these games like right in front of them.
Yeah, again, I feel like I'm doing a disservice to people to say that computer games are a medicine. I think it's in certain situations they could be. It's funny you mentioned that. I knew a guy who was in one of the guilds. Guild is like the collection of people who play this game together. And he used to be a pop star in, I think it was Poland, maybe. He used to be a famous pop star in Poland, and he admitted to us one of the times we were chatting. He was like the guild leader, if you like, and he said to us, "Yeah, I used to be a pop star in Poland or something, like earning a lot of money." And I was like, he never went into too many of the details, but he, he was leading this guild, and his life had become running a guild to go raiding to down these bosses from wealthy pop star. And like one of the things perhaps that lured him into it was the anonymity you get online. If you get sick of the negatives associated with being famous, you could see how you could potentially get sucked into games because you don't have to deal with that shit.
Yeah.
I think you can maybe draw out a parallel between alcohol and games, where I think when people start drinking, we know the dangers of alcohol before you engage in it. You know you can get addicted. You know you can crash your car, whatever. Yeah. I think going into game, it's fun. Oh, maybe we should alert people, or people should be aware that this is a potential.
Not try this medicine.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, but I mean, hold on. Then do without alcohol too. Alcohol, cigarettes, like that can be a medicine. I loved nicotine was.
But I don't think you go. Alcohol, you hear you can get drunk, but you don't think you can crash your car. You know those happen to crazy guys, not to me.
Let me tell you something. Like, how many other vices will show off that they are addicting. You don't say, hey, drink this alcohol, it's really addicting.
Yeah.
Hey, watch this movie, it's really addicting.
No, not at all.
But computer games, they say, hey, play this game, it's really addicting.
Yeah.
Why the fuck
Right,
would I
yeah.
want to get addicted? But it's so accepted. Like, addicting means good. Or a very well done
First 2
computer
seconds.
game. Yeah.
Did you, hold on.
Yeah.
Sorry, this is huge news.
There you go.
The Canada America game just started.
Oh.
And in the first 2 seconds, 3 guys just dropped the
2
gloves and
seconds,
started fighting each
Kachuk
other.
Hagel.
Uh-oh.
The next face-off, 3 seconds, Bennett, Kachuk. Both Kachuks in the first 2 seconds. That's legendary, man.
Oh my
The
god.
first 10 seconds was 3 fights.
This
Damn.
is.
And
Wow.
Canada's up 1-0. Okay, let's go. Sexy.
I got my lucky hat on here. We gotta bring him luck. But yeah, but I think like cigarettes or alcohol, I think maybe games should come with a warning. It's not just fun.
Well, what would happen if a cigarette company started saying, hey, smoke our cigarette, it's super addicting? Do you think that's going to be seen as a positive thing? But in games it is. It's like, hey, play this game, it's super addicting. People associate addicting with games with, oh, that means it's a good game.
Yeah.
So we have cigarette packages with holes in the trachea or whatever, the lung pictures.
Yeah.
Should we put the computer games with like,
With like a
Johnny Zombie with a joint hanging out of his mouth, like
yeah.
F+ on his exam? Like, if you play this game, you may smoke lots of joints and fail your
Well,
classes.
you already know from our reaction, the image is hilarious. So it tells you there's a very strange thing that goes on with this stuff.
You log into your game and it's got one of those pictures.
Warning, you could be this guy in 6 months.
Going back to China and their policy on games.
Oh, that is very
kids.
clever. Very cleverly done in China. So let me explain.
And so you can explain it in a sec, but how it's twisted back home is like, oh, regulating everything. Oh, don't let them take your freedoms.
I tell you what, China does
think it's
some
awesome.
stuff so well. They do, dealing with drugs, I believe they do very well there. As far as I'm aware, there's no drug problem in China. And dealing with computer games is done, I believe, in a very interesting way. I can't attest to how well it works, but I will tell
How
you my
effective it is,
personal
but, yeah.
experience. I'll tell you my personal experience. So I had this experience, Chongqing 2016, I think it was. I went to equivalent of an internet gaming cafe in China with my Chinese girlfriend at the time. And
That one?
let's not go there. And the way it works in China, you have to have a Chinese ID in order to register for the internet cafe and play on the games. But you don't, if you have the ID, then it's a way of testing if you're over a certain age. You can use these things without a Chinese ID, and as a foreigner you can, but what they do is they basically class you as a kid. So unless you go through up-teen hoops to get your own Chinese ID, I guess. I don't know how that worked. I never found out. But what it means is if you go into one of these gaming cafes without a Chinese ID, as a foreigner or anyone, you get classed as essentially a kid. So I played World of Warcraft whilst being classed as a kid in China. And the interesting thing they've done is, or at least they had back then, they have modified the software directly so that if you're on the game, if you're in the gaming cafe playing the game, you're under 16, or they think you are, they have a green, yellow, red light system. You are allowed to play the game in the green light for 2 hours. After 2 hours, it switches to yellow light. What yellow light means is it actually changes how you can play the game, in that you will not be able to do certain things in the game. You will not be able to get certain loot in the game or money. So it basically removes the incentive to play the game in that way. And then if you play even longer, I think it goes to red light, where all you can do is log in and chat to your friends. You can't actually get any loot or gold coins from killing things. So, and you can't get any experience points. So essentially, once you play the game too long, you cannot benefit your character. You can go on and chat to your friends.
That's really good.
Very cleverly done, right? So if you play the game too much, there's no point.
And as a player, that gives you... I think sometimes you get lost in the game, and if they're throttling back all your rewards, you look and you're like, oh, it's a game. It's more of a peek behind the curtain. Like, oh, this is just a game, and I can disconnect from that. Oh, wow.
I think it was a green, yellow, red light system or green and red light system, but that was the essence of how it worked. The longer you play, the less the benefits, or they just cut them off. After 4 hours, I believe the only thing you could do is log in and chat to your friends and move around. You can't actually kill monsters and get any benefit or increase in experience points. And then that red light stays in effect for 24 hours. After 24 hours, you can go back to green light for 2 or 3 hours. So in that way, they can stop kids from getting too hooked on these things. Very clever system. And they had to have...
should be standard.
Should be standard around the planet, right? I mean, by doing that, you can essentially allow them to chat to their friends, but you don't get so hooked on improving your character all the time, or even if you were, there are limits. And Blizzard must have done some deal with China, like, yeah, you can sell your game over here, but after 2 hours, we want the rewards dialed back.
Solid.
And
you got 1 billion people. Okay, 2 hours each. I'm okay.
Yeah, and while some people might say, well, God, that's really draconian. I want to play my game whenever I want. Yeah, but I feel like when you're younger, you have less self-control, right? I mean, they don't let you...
But there should be probably more regulation on a lot of things, whether that's sugar in the West or the packaged foods. And
we see it now with phones and stuff, with all the bans for kids for social media, and I don't know which country's doing it, but no screen time for babies, maybe, or something like that. Totally agree. And
very interesting system.
That is really good. And don't they regulate kids' playtime to like Friday night, Saturday night, Sunday nights? They have like 2 hours or something they can play.
I think there was a limit on, like, if you didn't show your...
That might just be recent.
No, I've seen that thing too.
That might just be recent.
I think it was like you're not allowed in the game, because these gaming cafes, some of them are open 24 hours, and maybe it was something like after 10 p.m. they kick you out if you're under 16. I can't remember.
Korea's got some restrictions too, where I think maybe they give you a time limit. Like after every game, say League of Legends, I think they say like you've been playing for 15 minutes, you've been playing for 30 minutes.
They tell you how long. Yeah.
And there might be a time restriction. Like you can't play after 11 if you're using your own ID number. But kids just use their parents.
But do they affect how your character can develop whilst in game?
I don't know.
No, that's what puts the brakes on everything.
Really?
That's really good.
Like we have
VLTs.
VLTs. We have VLTs in the bars at home.
You have what?
VLTs, video lottery terminals.
Oh, I see.
And they show up like every 10 minutes or something. Like, you've been playing for 10 minutes. Are you sure you want to continue?
Yeah.
I haven't won yet.
because it's just a stop that they've put in to try and slow down. And I don't know, I'm like, I haven't played in 15 years. Like, I just want to put a few bucks in and play, get out of the way.
Yeah. But being conscious of how to play is a really useful thing.
Yeah.
And actually, I remember back in the day, around 2004, there was... You've heard of Discord, right?
Yeah.
Popular gaming chat system. Well, before Discord in 2004, I think a lot of people were using something called Xfire or Crossfire. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that bit of software did was it would track how long you're playing these games. And that helped one of my buddies get off playing World of Warcraft because every time he logged into Crossfire or Xfire, whatever it was, it would record how long he was playing World of Warcraft, and at the end of the week it would spit out a report. This is how many hours you played. And he came to us one day and he said, my God, I played World of Warcraft for 40 hours this week. I was only at work for 35.
Job. Yeah.
So he'd spent more time on World of Warcraft than his full-time job. Yeah. And slowly I saw his life over that year. I was a placement software engineering student at the time. I saw his life go from fairly happy to divorce and problems and, I want to quit my job and all this negativity. And again, I don't want to demonize games, but in terms of subjective experience, it is different for different people, and there are cases, myself included, where you can just get too damn hooked on these things, and raising your level of awareness of what's going on, like tracking the time you spend on these things. And
but that's why I think, like, your phones now, everyone has the device on it, but nobody checks it because they're scared.
You mentioned you were at a work party and everyone was like, "Yo, show us your screen time."
Yeah.
And I checked mine. I was like, "Ooh, I think there's room for improvement." And now, you know what? Now,
I was going to say, it should pop up every morning and say you were on your phone for 7 hours yesterday, 2 hours, 30 minutes, whatever.
Yeah.
Because It's right. People don't actually conscientiously understand how much time they're spending.
Yeah.
So I think when you get up and you touch your phone in the morning, the first thing should be yesterday, 6 hours, 24 minutes, 2 hours, 12 minutes, whatever.
But dude, most of the problems in our lives, they're there because we've allowed them to slip below our awareness.
Yeah.
I remember there was a girl I used to work with when I was in IT corporate. When I was in IT corporate, there was a girl I used to work with, and she said to me one day, I don't know where all my money's going. And I knew where it was going. And I said to her very gently, how many coffees do you have a day?
Cocaine Carol. I know where it's going.
How many coffees do you have a day? She said, I have about 3 or 4 every 2 or 3 hours. 4 coffees a day. And do you buy anything else when you get a coffee? She was a pretty overweight girl. Yeah. And she was like, well, yeah, lunch I'll get a donut and whatever. So like, how much money would you say you spend on average a day? About 10, 12 pounds. So like, what's that? 20 Canadian dollars. Yeah. A day. Yeah. You add that up times 5 for your week.
$500 a week. Yeah.
But that's what I'm saying. Like, the phones have the capabilities. Most people don't even know how to check it.
Yeah.
And if you ask them to, they'll be like, no, I'm not. And it's not. Again, like my pre-med students, now they all have Apples and Apple computers, so it counts their iPad, their iPhone, and their MacBook. But those guys are 14, 16, 18 hours. Like every living minute is either their iPad, they're studying on their computers, sure. But it's like, what else? There's only time here for screen and sleeping. There's nothing else in there.
Yeah, it's wild.
And that's why I say, like, these kids at hockey.
Yeah.
Hey, Dad, if you can get your kid to come for 2 hours and not even think about a phone, that's a huge win.
That's a huge win.
That's a huge win if you can get them to come, have fun, play, get along with other people, and not touch or think about a phone. Yeah. That's a massive win. Yeah. Huge.
Does it break it down on your phone, like what you used, like
YouTube, this much.
I actually get
Facebook,
an automatic report. It says how many hours I spend on my phone weekly. It's automatic. It's a Samsung phone. It says, you spent an hour less or an hour more.
Okay, I get that.
That's all I get.
Where does it send it to?
It just pops up as a notification.
Hold on.
Like,
mine should be here now.
Yeah, I don't get that.
Wait.
Maybe it's just, I don't know. Maybe
I got to turn it on. I was going to ask
the weekly report. Yeah,
I was going to ask not from personal experience, but in general.
Yeah.
What about porn restrictions in China?
Oh, I don't know.
He wants to clarify that's not for personal.
No, but you know, in Korea, that police thing comes. I remember, like, 20 years ago, that police thing. Like, is the guy outside my window? Where is this guy? The police thing comes up, and it's common. Everyone, it happened not just for porn, for anything that's seen as like not.
Okay, well, luckily for me, this is one area of my life where I can say I have been something of an angel. Because I knew I was so susceptible to computer game addiction, I thought, right, I'm not going to do gambling and I'm not going to do porn. So those two have always been off limits to me.
And those two are probably the biggest problems in North America right now.
Gambling and porn.
Online gambling. You can gamble on anything.
Ugh.
I can gamble how many times you're going to shake that pen in the next 2 minutes.
But if you,
and porn's the other one, and it's killing generations of young men. It's crazy.
If we talked about perception earlier, when you look back, you're like, ooh, computer games was a good one to a good vice to
I have such
to
a
get.
mix. I have such a mix about computer games because some of my fondest memories from my childhood were playing games with my friends, but also some of the worst things that happened in my life were because of getting too hooked. So again, it's just such a subjective thing, and I think honestly the best thing you can do with this stuff is to raise awareness of it and restrict it with kids. Those two things. When I get the website going, I don't want to demonize games because they do have good things. I do have fond memories, but what I do want to do is just gently raise awareness to people because some people don't even realize how much time they're spending on it. And it's very easy to justify, I had a bad day at work, I want to chill, I want to play games. Yeah, it's fair enough, but just raise awareness. And of the different pitfalls, like the different things I used to tell myself, like, at least it's better than watching TV. Yeah, but dude, you can do a lot more with your time than play games and watch TV.
100%. That's why with the impressive restrictions you say they have for games, I was wondering if they have the same thing for porn. Hey, you've been watching too long.
Just
turn it off, buddy.
Get your hands on the desk.
But I think America is kind of like
you gotta scan all 10 fingerprints.
Just like
10 fingerprints, make sure what you did.
Just like the big gulp and the largey size, everything has to be just extreme, right? Like,
is that a porn?
There's no just anything, and it's gotten absurd. I mean. And the OnlyFans, was that, what is it, OnlyFans? that girl's, she's a British girl, isn't she?
Right.
Trying to have sex with 1,000 guys in one day.
Jesus Christ.
Like it's just she did 100 whatever last month, and now she's going for the world record. Like it's
1,000 in a day?
Yeah.
Hold on, break that down by time. How do you?
I don't care. But it's just, I mean, it's just getting outrageous, and this is kind of like the West for me, where it just there's no limits. Like where I think sometimes we should have limits.
Yeah.
Or not censorship, but limits and restrictions. And if you told me that China censors all, or there is no porn, or nobody's ever, I mean, I'm sure if you're talking with these guys that you work with there, I'm sure it's come up in conversation, but I'm just curious if it's similar to the rest of the stuff with the restrictions.
She has to have sex with, I swear to God, 0.69 guys per minute.
Jesus Christ.
It's a funny number to.
Sorry for blasphemy, but yeah.
Pump and dump.
0.6.
That's what she calls it, I think. Anyways, it's absurd.
What's it called?
I think she calls it pump and dump.
I don't even want to touch on that. It's gross.
Anyways.
But like, the thing is with porn is, what was it? There was a study that was done where when a man ejaculates, there's equivalent of a dopamine rush of like sniffing some cocaine. It's something
a
ridiculous.
couple hundred
like
times
that.
or something. Yeah.
It's just crazy stats. And I mean, I know dopamine systems are more complicated.
But
than
it's
that.
free compared to cocaine, and that's why it's so crazy.
Yeah.
And they call these now the masturbation machines.
Jesus.
Because every kid's got one, every person's got one, and this is why it's such a crazy problem.
Well, I can tell you, my nephew, I bought him a laptop because he was saying he wanted to get into software development. And I went there a year later, and the goddamn thing was filled with fucking, all these pop-ups. And I was like, you've been fucking looking at porn, haven't you? You have not used this to do anything constructive. You have just used this as a fucking porn machine. And like the kid went bright red. Yeah, clearly he had. So, yeah, you got to be careful with this stuff.
A weird one. Without looking at porn on this phone, any website, say like I'll be in Google News or whatever, any website that I pull up, there's like dirty kind of, I want to say like porn hooks, like something that that a young kid might look at.
That's what I worry about the kids, yeah.
Or I'll pull something
crazy.
up in class and it'll be some chick, some cartoon chick blowing a guy, or
I'm worried about that in class too. Like at the uni, I'm like, we're doing fashion trends or something, and I just type in Carhartt. I'm like, oh fuck, don't be something crazy, please don't be something crazy. And who the hell, like he says, like the anime or whatever, what's the Japanese, like all that now that stuff's seen like soft porn or something, and it just pops up wherever. Well, it's not real, so it's kind of cartoony.
But that's a legit 90% of the
Google ads, pop-ups.
The fucking stories that I click on.
Malware?
No. Just whatever. You're scrolling your Google feed. I can click on anything from BBC to.
Oh, right.
Bad.
Sorry, I lost the track.
Anyway, it's clearly listening to your conversations.
Yeah. No, but
You're gonna have double tomorrow.
I'm saying,
What have you been?
legit. Yeah. You guys don't call me tomorrow. I'll be busy.
Delete your history, my friend.
Sure. No, but whatever I click on, whether it's a popular news site, it's on all of my all the websites. Like as I scroll through, it's wild.
Everyone, I feel like, does everyone have a vice?
Yes, absolutely.
And I feel like, for me, computer games filled that hole of not having many friends and not having anything to kind of pick me up a bit. It was like, some guys go to alcohol, some go to gambling or porn, and for me it was always computer games. Is there ever a way to live a life without any vices? Is it even possible? I don't even know.
No.
No. It's sugar. It's this.
It's something.
Coffee.
But is it possible to live without having any vices? Is it possible?
It might come back to perspective too, and how you
Brian Johnson.
What is it?
Is that name Brian Johnson?
Which one?
Who's the guy who's 50 trying to look like he's 20?
Oh fuck, that guy's weird, man. That guy's weird. Doesn't he look weird? Yeah.
I don't know. I have a preconceived thoughts about him just because I know what he does. But
he's a strange character. But it might depend on your perspective. When I look, say, I mentioned I got too into Zelda, right? Ocarina of Time. But when I look on that, I didn't quit the game before it was finished. I explored every single part of that map and completed everything. I found all the golden Skulltulias and everything. Yeah. When I look at that chapter, I look at that as like, oh, I completed that full thing. I didn't quit. I didn't, and I use that as fuel for maybe the next thing. Like, oh, I didn't quit that. Why would I quit the next thing? That's like a completed task, and it felt good. Okay, I'm done with that. Now we can move on to the next one. So there might be a shift in perspective. That
you take that feeling of ambition, you need to apply that to your real life.
Yeah.
And the interesting thing is that you know, once you've been hooked on games for a while and you've made some achievements in games, you've got to realize you can do that in your real life. You just have to appreciate that the satisfaction is not as fast, and you've got to just accept that the payoff is delayed. It's not that instant gratification or close to instant gratification that you get in developing a character online.
One of the few things I took from university was, and actually probably one of the worst teachers, that he said, in your life, you need to learn how to deal with delayed gratification.
Yeah.
And if you can learn that, you're good.
The world's your oyster, right?
Yeah.
It's all about self-mastery. I just started getting into Stoicism. I bought a book, The Daily Stoic. Every day you read like a little paragraph about lessons from Seneca and Marcus Aurelius and stuff. I cannot plug Stoicism enough. It is so good. Like we've done a disservice to Stoicism over the years. To be Stoic is associated with being emotionless. That is not what the philosophy is about. It's about developing the gap between something that happens in the external world and how you react to it internally. And once you can kind of get your head around that and start practicing it, you can practice self-control, you can start building discipline, you can expect to receive gratification later. Anyway, I don't want to bang on about that too much, but yeah, look into Stoicism if you have trouble with this stuff.
Marcus Aurelius is what? Yeah. How long ago?
Marcus Aurelius was he was one of the good emperors of Rome. He was actually an adopted kid. He was not born into being an heir to the Roman Empire.
It's the only way to get a good king, isn't it?
Yeah, to adopt them, right? Yeah. Otherwise, the kid gets spoiled. Who knows? Maybe. I mean, he's a prime example. Yeah, there you go. Yeah, Commodus and all that. Yeah. But yeah, there's a lot of interesting things about Roman history. But one of them has to be Marcus Aurelius and how he took Stoicism on board. You know, by all means, no one's an angel, but the guy did a lot of good despite being in such a position of power.
But the shit he wrote, was it 2,000 years ago?
Yeah, Roman Empire was 2,000 years ago, right?
The things he wrote 2,000 years ago applied directly.
That's interesting how Stoicism does. Yeah, Stoicism was, it started off around that time, and the lessons you can learn from that are still so applicable today, honestly. Because honestly, all of these vices, whether it's, you know, smoking, drinking, computer games, blah, 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 it all boils down to the same things they figured out back then. You know, everyone seems to have a vice, and you've got to somehow temper it. And that's what Stoicism tries to teach you. It teaches you how to temper those vices rather than just get so sucked in.
He didn't, that wasn't a book that he wrote either. Wasn't that like his journals?
So yeah, it was called Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. It was supposed to be essentially a private journal, but it got published, and it was so interesting to see the inner thoughts of essentially one of the most powerful people on the planet back then. Yeah. I still haven't managed to go through it. It's quite at the moment I'm just doing daily Stoic. That for me works. It's like 1-2 paragraphs a day. That's solid. It. And you get the core lessons and you get the interpretation of them. Because remember, the translation, it doesn't apply so directly, but people who have studied it and interpreted it into a modern way. The Daily Stoic is the book I have. It's very enlightening, and you don't have to spend a lot of time on it.
Yeah, cool.
Back to your computer science degree.
Oh yeah. Kind of out of date these days when I got it.
but when I asked you originally there if you're still with it and if you still follow whatever, I was talking with Bri the other day, and I think it was who's the NVIDIA founder, Jensen.
NVIDIA?
Yeah.
I don't know who founded it.
Anyways, and he was talking about before the end of the year, all programmers will be useless.
Unlikely.
That before we needed a chief tech officer, we needed a front end manager, back end manager. You had to hire 3 or 4 workers for each thing. This, that, and now that, and the big guy, the Amazon, Googles are already doing it. But it'll be available to the general public in the next 6 to 8 months.
That OnlyFans girl's looking for a front and back end manager too.
That you'll just be able to go speak to website, speak to app, and you can teach the AI to launch it, if it doesn't have X amount of success rate, analyze it from a different perspective, remodel it, relaunch it again, and until it hits at least 80% efficiency or connectivity with viewers or whatever, keep doing this over and over again until it succeeds. And just that 5 years ago, it was, okay, well, this. And 10 years ago, it was like it's huge, right? Like get into programming, coding. Yeah. Even 2-3 years ago, coding.
When I went to uni, it was those lecture theatres were packed out, man.
But now, then there was kind of like, you don't need it. And I was like, no, we still need these kind of coders. It's still important to know how this works. And they're going to get blocks, and you just clip in blocks now, but you still need to know the basics. But now it's like, it seems like you don't need any of that. You just have to know how to engage and prompt the AI to make what you want.
But you still have to understand the fundamentals to give.
Ask
a good question, you got to know.
Where it said like, once you have the extensive enough AI, make me an app exactly like TikTok.
Let me inject a bit of hope for anyone who's looking at this kind of stuff. One thing is AI hallucinates. This expression means that you'll plug in a question and it will give you a wrong answer, but the AI will, air quotes, think it's giving you a right answer. There was a classic case where a guy wrote into the ChatGPT how many R's are in the word strawberry, and it said something like 4, and then it said, no, there are 3. Why did you say 4? And then the AI went through this process of trying to gaslight the person typing in this quote, this query, saying, no, I said this, I said that. So I think the fact that AI systems hallucinate is a big problem right now. The other thing is that to actually learn how to code, to effectively write a bit of code, like a while loop or an if statement, stuff like that, the skill of coding is very different to the skill of, let's say, programming and software engineering, where software engineering is actually more about your skills to problem solve. And a big part of the problem solving is actually interpreting the customer's requirements, and typically customers don't always know what they want. So it's never going to be as simple as type in to a prompt, hey, can you make this program, and boom, it spits out the program. Even if it did it perfectly, it's not going to take into account that customers don't always know what they want. Yes. And I think this is one of the big things that has always been in the software industry is communication with humans. You have to be able to interpret what someone probably actually wants rather than what they're saying that they want.
But on the other, just devil's advocate.
Yeah.
The AI can analyze millions of perspectives, of thoughts, of people's actions daily. Yeah. And they can predict. They know better than what you know what the customer wants.
Yeah, that could be one thing. Yeah,
and they can adjust and fix it at a speed that might take you 6 months to a year to analyze it and go, oh shit, we should have kept this coffee and not that coffee because we didn't sell this menu. And it can do it in 10 seconds.
I'll tell you, I am by no means an expert on AI, but I will say there is always going to be the need for the human touch. And I think the way that people are...
I mean specifically in relation to coding, programming, software engineering, etc. Is it, like, these are the biggest guys in the world saying, hey, listen,
but
I'm getting faster, easier, better, more efficient with a 50th of the people, and I'm just going to keep, this is just going to go...
But new things will pop up then, right? Just like everything. Oh, they're getting rid of the cashiers for...
Yeah, I'm just talking about related to his degree, and that now if you're 18 years old, would you go into a computer science degree because it'll have a completely different meaning in 10 years where
if you grew up in the Silicon Corridor, right?
I think like with all these things, as technology evolves, let's say the demand for certain employment roles may shrink when technology takes over some of that functionality, but in every time you see this shrinking market, people are going to freak out saying, oh, tomorrow there'll be nothing. But typically what you see is it's just a shrinking. So where you might have had 5 software engineers working on a team to solve a problem, maybe it's going to be 1 with an AI. That does not mean the market will disappear. It means that it's just going to shrink. So again, like in terms of ESL, you can see how the ESL industry shrank in Japan over the last 20 years. Perhaps that's going to happen to Korea. But that ESL industry still exists in Japan. It's difficult to break into it from no experience and not living there already, but it's still there. And for a lot of people freaking out about, ESL English jobs are going to disappear in Korea. Well, I don't think they're going to disappear. You're just in the middle of a shrinking market.
Yeah.
And you can pretty much look at Japan as to maybe what we're going to see in Korea over the next 20 years. Yeah. I would guess. I can't say for sure.
And new markets emerge too.
And new markets
25 years ago, there was no need.
Sure.
And those skills as a teacher apply to so many things. It's not like you...
There was no need for us 25 years. You never... Or personally, I could never imagine that I would be video editing or taking film and learning how to do mastering on audio, you know. Yeah. So there's with the technology comes new opportunity as well, right?
Yeah.
I like it. What else we got here, dude? Tell me about the D&D.
Oh yeah. There's
the D&D.
Yeah, there's a little gang in Ulsan. We have like a D&D group, Dungeons and Dragons. We're actually meeting next week, and I think there's a post in Ulsan online group about it.
This won't come out till... maybe I can post it today. I don't know.
No, it's no rush. I mean, we've already got numbers for next week, so it's okay.
Maybe how'd you get into it? Tell us about your experience with the group.
Oh, yeah. I mean, as I mentioned before, I was so hooked on MMORPGs, massively multiplayer online role-playing games like World of Warcraft, and a lot of those games were initially... They came from stuff like Diablo, and Diablo was really influenced heavily, I would say, from D&D, Dungeons and Dragons. And I've kind of done full circle in that in terms of getting away from those games and going back to D&D. D&D is really getting very popular these days because you can sit at a table with a bunch of friends, no screens. Well, I mean, you can if you want, but you can avoid that technological... taint. Not to demonize, but and just have fun playing a character, rolling dice. You essentially have the rules of the game in a book, and the randomness of what do you get in your loot drops, or what do you get as outcomes of certain scenarios as a dice roll. And instead of having pre-programmed scripts as your bosses, you're essentially running up against a human who's acting as the DM, the dungeon master. So you can have a lot of fun with your buddies without playing computer games, is what I'm saying. If you were or are hooked on those types of games, especially RPGs, I would say, man, go on D&D, start playing some D&D, and actually have some human interactions, because you can still scratch that itch. And it's very much restricted in terms of how often you can organize a group and meet up in person. You can do these things online, but I've never found D&D addictive. It's just like a fun social activity, I would say, for me personally.
A couple hours on a Saturday afternoon?
Well, more like 4. But then that's why we do it like every 3 or 4 weeks instead of every weekend. But everyone's different, you know. But D&D is a good way to scratch that RPG itch.
Your experience with the Ulsan group has been overwhelmingly positive.
Very positive, I mean, I've been knocking around with them for probably just about 6 months, maybe 12 months. Brian's a really good guy. He's typically the DM, but we try and rotate DM because he likes to play his own character every now and then. And in general, the D&D community is a pretty friendly one. In general.
The one of the members of that group. There's one member who really gets into his character.
Who was that?
Krieger.
Oh yeah. He had a character, Shady Sam, hilarious.
And it's at first it was weird for me.
Have you had Krieger on here yet?
No, you should. I think we're gonna set up a little painting day, and you're more than welcome to. But seeing him get into character and just do wild shit, I was like,
fun.
Why is he doing that? The first time I played, I was like, what's this guy doing? And then later you go home, you're like, those are the things you remember. You want to be, I don't know. You want to be part of it, and you want to
have fun. It's the creative element as well that you get in D&D that you can't usually get in World of Warcraft. There were RPG servers where you were supposed to, roughly play a character whenever you're in game. So, like, you couldn't have like a guild name like laser fish or something. Like you had to have something fairly like medieval as your name, or you might get flagged. So they kind of loosely enforce some kind of fun creativity where you're playing characters, but that's a lot more easily done with D&D, where you can actually play a role as opposed to just be yourself but react in different ways. It's fun, It's
a collaborative storytelling.
Storytelling,
which is cool, man.
Anything that's a bit creative, you got to grab that and go for it if you enjoy it. 100%.
That's I'm really happy I decided to put a foot in that world. It's fun.
You enjoyed it, right?
I do very much so. And just looking back at my preconceptions about that, it was the same. Like, you fucking nerds.
I mean, it's definitely pretty nerdy, but it's fun.
It's good, dude. Count me in. I'm a huge fan, and even just there's so many different aspects of it. There's actually playing the game. I enjoy reading the books.
Yeah, they're
going through the monster manual. I got the books at home. That's a fun. Well, that's a fun read. Now I got the printer. I'm printing all the things out and painting them. It's awesome, man.
It is. And like there was this whole thing with World of Warcraft where people would be min-maxing. Min-maxing is where you try to maximize the amount of damage your particular character can do. And there's still room to do that in D&D. But honestly, the fun in that game comes from just playing a character you want to play. Yeah. Like I play a character who's kind of old and crotchety, and he has limitations, and I feel like sometimes the limitations make the game more fun because it's a challenge. I mean, you get that in World of Warcraft, but in different ways. It's like the challenge of playing a character who's a bit crotchety. You can't just min-max your way through the game. If that makes sense.
An awesome pastime for me anyways, but I find it.
It's fun.
It's good.
It's fun. It's nice. And it's away from the screens.
Even better.
And it's not drinking. You're away from the screens. You're not drinking. There's a lot of benefits.
I don't know. When Aiden used to organize them, it used to be at Wabar or something.
Oh, that was Magic.
Well,
I think that's Magic the Gathering.
Mix.
I think that's a different.
They used to play at the Wabar for 6 hours or something. It was like, you just get a few beers and you just play. And
is he still playing?
Oh, he's in Tejon now.
I got a couple of buddies in Tejon as well.
I was reading in the Maidenhead Advertiser this morning.
Oh my God! Where did this come from? Fuck it up.
No, I didn't know where you're from. Did some digging, found that, and it's known. It was named or categorized, as a clone city.
A clone city?
Have you heard that term before? I learned it like 3 hours ago.
Okay.
As a clone city, because when you went downtown, there was no or very few independent shops.
Oh, I see.
So you just go down and it's Starbucks, Dunkin' Donuts, this. Yeah. And you know what? I was trying to explain that to my wife recently about what I see here in my neighborhood or Ulsan Deyap, where you go down and it's just like. It's all franchise or mostly empty stores these days or franchise. And I'm like, what? Is this a reflection of society and like what people want? Like, do you just want like the fastest, cheapest shit possible? But your city has, they have like a rejuvenation plan. Or they had, I don't know how far back that goes. But they said, hey, we gotta change this, and now there's like lots of. I checked out the website and everything, man. It looks like a really nice place to live. And the people who live there, in the promotional video, anyways, it seemed like you're very proud to live in a small. It's what 65,000.
Yeah, pretty small town. It's funny actually when you consider the types of people you connect most with abroad. I find that it's the cultural gaps become irrelevant when you mix with people who grew up in a town or city of a similar size to your own. The people like
75,000, 65,000,
100,000.
I've met expats who grew up in London, and although I spent 4 years working in London, I find it very difficult to connect with them. And it's not to say anything bad about London. It's just a case of very different life experiences. I connect more easily with a local Korean person who grew up in a town of similar size than I can, my countrymen who grew up in a large city.
Interesting. That's why we don't like Seoul and whatever else.
Yeah, Busan and Seoul do not appeal to me personally.
You can't connect with it. It's just go for 2 days, it's fun, and come home, because that's not home for me.
Yeah, it's like where you grew up, the values of... Yeah, it's just different values.
Yeah.
I think. Like, I mean, my girlfriend, she's a Korean girl, and she grew up in Anyang, and it's quite a small place, comparable to Maidenhead, perhaps. And we connect really strongly. It's just a case of, I feel like, if you're looking for buddies or girlfriends, boyfriends, partners, I think you're going to have a lot more luck if you look for people who come from a city or town of similar size to your own when you did your growing up. It doesn't actually matter so much which country they're from, in my view.
Cool. You do you guys ever jump off the largest railway bridge into the river?
I never did that myself. I went bungee jumping in New Zealand a couple of months ago.
Yeah, how was that?
Fucking terrifying.
Was it called Buddy Hackett?
Yeah, Hackett something. It was one of the first bungee jumps in the world, I think.
Yeah.
And
you go off the bridge, yeah?
New Year's Day, jumped off the bridge. Yeah, it was crazy, man. I was swearing and shouting the whole way down like a...
I watched my wife's video. She did that.
Oh, yeah?
Probably 20 years ago anyways.
Yeah.
And they're like, 3, 2, 1, go.
They
doesn't go. They pushed her.
They pushed her?
I think. Oh, she was.
They pushed her. Oh man, no, they didn't push me.
They probably have to push most people.
I don't know. I mean, the way they did it with me was it was just verbal coaxing, strong coaxing. It was like they tie up your feet and everything, and then just like, okay, shuffle forward to the end, left foot, right foot, left foot, right foot. Okay, look down, good, arms forward,
subtle,
go. It
subtle
was like,
coaxing. Jump, you pussy!
I tell you what, it was very well done. Actually, the whole thing was very well organised, and the thing that gets you that you don't realise is actually most people jump. Most people.
I jumped on 2. 3, 2, because I knew if I waited to 1, I'm not going.
Oh, shit.
3,
smart.
2, let's go.
Oh, I had to hit 0 before I went. I was terrified, but I did it. Swearing the whole way down.
Yeah. You made it.
Made it, yeah. That was a fun start to the year. I'm glad I did it.
That's incredible. That's a big jump. That's a high jump too.
Well, yeah, man, it was a big one. I mean, just for me, it was so outside my comfort zone. It's always been on the old bucket list to do a bungee jump. I'm just glad I did it.
Yeah, good for you.
Yeah,
good
finally.
for you. Better things ahead in 2025.
Yeah, man, I hope so. Touch wood.
Anything else? One more time for the website.
Yeah, deanwoot.com, DeanWoot.com.
Coming in April.
It's going to be coming in April, yeah, mid-April, hopefully. It will be live. I'm just basically, the book I wrote, I'm just going to chop it up into blog posts.
Why don't you put the book back online too?
Maybe. I mean, at the moment, it's going to have a core focus on just like showing my story about computer games, how I got too hooked, and then how I got out of that. Because it did feel like a mountain to get out of that at the time. Like the idea of, air quote, abandoning my friends online to develop new friends in the real world and get some kind of a normal life going. It felt like a mountain to climb. And I just want to express to people you can do it. I'm not going to make a website that's like, you should do this, you should not do that. Games are evil. Yeah. I'm not going to do any of that crap. I'm just going to share my story and what I did, because some people need to hear it.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's the subjective experience as well. You shouldn't demonize games. Just raise awareness that for some people, you got to be careful, right?
Sure. Do you regret now that you've climbed out and cut off your game friends and you got to hang out with people like Nate? Is that have we taken 3 steps back?
I try my best not to regret anything, because anything you've done in your past will lead you to your now.
I agree.
Wherever you're now is because of what happened in the past. Right. So if you regret anything, it's like pulling on a thread. There's this great episode of Star Trek: The Next Generation called Tapestry. Yeah. It was so compelling. The idea that there's this character Q who's basically has the power of God, let's say, and he rescues Jean-Luc Picard from dying. And he says, okay, let's go through your old life. What do you want to change? And like he plays the devil in that regard. And he's like, oh yeah, I you know, he basically goes through this process.
I didn't use a condom that one time with that.
Well, one of the key things was actually getting with a girl that he never did. And then slowly he sees his whole life unravel, and he flashes forward, to where he would have been if he'd changed that one little thing from the past that he regrets. And he's in a totally different place. He's not the captain of the ship anymore. He's like running a fairly low-level job, and he's sick of his life.
The exact point of that Midnight Library book. The exact story.
Right? Yeah. Well, it's worth noting. There's no point having these regrets, man. Where you are today, you're going to be somewhere different, and you might be in a better place. But again, it's like that farmer story. It's like something good today might be something bad tomorrow. Something bad tomorrow.
Perspective. It's all perspective.
It's all perspective. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Just frame it right.
Let us eat some lunch.
Sounds good, man. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah. Thanks for coming, dude.
Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, all right. Goodbye, everybody.